Welcome back. I've got Andrew Krepshetty's on the line. Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me, Michael, and nice to talk to you.
Happy New Year and great to talk to you. Really looking forward to this conversation because you're doing some amazing work at Red Balloon, and obviously you've done some great work throughout your career. So why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Cool. Yeah. No, I grew up in San Francisco Bay Area, did the old .com thing. Decided I wanted a change of pace, a change of scenery, and moved up to Idaho 25 years ago. Was blessed to start a bunch of different businesses. I've started businesses as small as a couple of employees and ran a $50 million business and sold I think I've had six successful exits over the years, ranging from, $100,000 to half a billion. So been kind of in the business world for a long time and really focused on labor market data and job creation primarily. So that's kind of my background. Then I've got five kids and live in beautiful Idaho on 60 acres, 10 minutes from the office, which is hard to beat.
Yeah, Idaho's a beautiful part of our country. It's been a long time since I've been there. I went there when a high school friend of mine was stationed at Mountain Home Air Force Base.
Yeah.
And I remember he gave us a little tour of the space. And then there was this one door that was blacked out window. And he goes, I can't, and he was a mechanic. He said, I can't show you what's in that room. And I believe, and he would never confirm long after he left, which is good for military personnel, but I'm
Right.
pretty sure it was one of the stealth things that we didn't know existed yet. So,
Yeah.
he got to play with all the cool toys. But
That's
and,
amazing. That's really cool.
yeah, Idaho is just a wonderful part of our country for sure. And the job market, and that's one of those top of mind subjects that
Yeah.
gets talked about monthly at least because they'll say, okay, the jobs report will get reported, or you'll hear stories like we talked about in the pre-show where Wall Street Journal's had a couple articles in the past 2 weeks on the job market. One of them was about how for people that are unemployed, it's harder for them to find work. And I think back to not that long ago, during the pandemic and a couple of years after it first happened, where organizations were having a really challenging time finding people to now people are having a really challenging time finding things. And you've been in this space for quite a while, and what are some insights that you want to share for not only for candidates but for businesses as well? Because I think it's important for organizations to recognize that there's a better way to go about this and finding talent and for talent to find organizations. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's the labor market's I don't know. I've always found it fascinating. And at the end of the day, it's people, right? And I think a lot of people forget that when you read those reports by economists, like we created 264,000 jobs. Well, that means that 264,000 individuals now have a career that they're, pursuing, they're trying to do well at. Right. And it's very easy when you have very large numbers, particularly you look at the US labor market and economy, to forget those are people involved, right? But the reality is that a job is a very defining feature of your life. It's not the only defining feature, but it's one of the major defining features. When you meet someone new, you ask them, what do you do? And you're asking them what their job is, but that question betrays that a job is more than just a 9 to 5 hobby. It's a defining feature. It's how you bless customers. It's how you build a community. It's how you build an economy. It's how you take care of your family. And so I guess I always like to well, let's remember there's humans involved. It's not just big job numbers. And the labor market has changed quite a bit. If you look over the last 10 years, the JOLTS report, which is the jobs and labor turnover report, basically how many open jobs are in the economy. We used to have 3 to maybe 4 million open jobs, and these are job postings out in the economy that are not being filled right now or are being filled, but then new ones are backfilling them. So 3 to 4 million open jobs. We went through the COVID massive disruption to the labor market and then came out of that. And we actually started peaking out at over 10 million open jobs in the labor market. So you had this weird kind of dynamic that happened in the labor market in the economy where people were receiving, whether it was COVID checks or they were afraid to go back to work or whatever reason, they didn't want to jump back into the labor market after being displaced. I think a lot of them lost faith in the labor market. They lost faith in the businesses. They felt like they didn't have any loyalty with the businesses that were hiring them or used to employ them and laid them off. So all of a sudden, the businesses were desperate to fill jobs. And I remember talking to a lot of businesses during that time period, and they really had to shift their mindset from, look, the labor market is not a vending machine. You can't just put in a quarter and get out a great employee. You need to be building an employment brand. You need to be building a talent network. You need to have a strategy around building the talent that you need for your business to be successful. And so businesses, I think, are starting to come to grips with that. But then, even though the unemployment rate continues to be very low in the, barely over 4%, people are having trouble finding jobs a lot more than they did even a year ago, which is really interesting to me because this economy has been dealing with the headwinds of inflation, of taxes and regulation, and honestly, the economy has been dealing with a lot of unknowns of what's going to happen with the election, what's going to happen with different state policies, natural disasters, et cetera. So all these things are coming in to play for these businesses, and they're starting to come to grips with this. But then the economy is kind of slowing down right now, and people are struggling to find a job. It's taking them longer. The average time to find a job in America is pushing 4 months right now. And you think about like, well, okay, what's 4 months? Well, if you're not getting a paycheck for 4 months, um, you really feel that and your family really feels that. And it's not just the money side, although that's a big part of it. It's the stress and anxiety of the job search process. And speaking of the job search process, I would say in a lot of ways it's really broken right now because, put yourself in the shoes of a job seeker. You are applying for a job and you're saying, "Hey, I think that my skill set would be a good fit for your business." And then most businesses aren't even responding to you. They're just ghosting you. They're not even giving you the compliment of a response. And those who do respond to you are saying, no, you're not a good fit because of a variety of factors. And you're not even given the opportunity to say, hey, wait, let me explain why I think I was a good fit for that job. On the business side, they're posting a job. If you're posting a job on Indeed or ZipRecruiter, one of the really big job boards, you might get thousands of responses from that job posting. Well, if you're a single recruiter at a small business, let's say under 500 employees, and you get 1,000 responses to a job posting, you can't give meaningful time of day to all 1,000 people who are applying. So you're trying to weed people out and not even respond to them because you don't have time for any interaction. So in my mind, the job market is very broken. And someone was telling me, they're like, well, it's not that big a deal. It's like a sales job, right? You're just selling yourself to these businesses. But I would argue that it's very different in that when you're selling a piece of software or a widget or whatever, you're selling something else and you're saying, hey, I think this is a good fit for you. And when you're rejected, they're rejecting the thing you're selling. But when you're trying to apply to a job, the thing they're rejecting is you, right? And so it's this very personal, painful process to actually look for a job. And so I know a lot of people who don't even want to jump in and then they find out that they need to grind for 4 months and it's not as easy as they thought it would be. So anyway, now I painted this horrible picture of what the job market is today, but unfortunately that's a reality. And that's what people are dealing with. Businesses are overwhelmed with applicants who aren't a good fit, and applicants are ghosted or not given the time of day or given the opportunity to fight and say, no, I really could do this job. Give me a chance. And so all those factors are playing into a very difficult labor market right now.
Yeah, and I've seen it, and we know, split time between San Diego and Toronto, completely different things, and the dynamic of the 51st state, I find quite entertaining, and that's a completely different subject for another day, because
Yes, right.
I'm a dual citizen, and I can vote and screw up two countries, and I take that very, very seriously. But the job markets are very similar, where in that it's very difficult for people to find opportunities. It's taking them longer.
Yeah,
There's the fake job posts and all of that, which is annoying. It's like, don't, if it doesn't exist, don't play. Come on. It's like you're
right.
wasting time by doing that. But, we're seeing in both markets, unfortunately, because if you don't get paid for several months, well, you have no revenue coming in, then that's problematic. And we've seen that with the amazing spike in demand for food bank services and homelessness and all of these things where for years, homeless, and I've worked in the sectors that, dealt with it, usually on average, 3 to 4% of the population will be homeless at any given time because of mental issues. Just they don't want to be around people. There's all kinds of different things. Well, now, those numbers in certain markets have been increasing, and it's not because these people are having mental health issues. It's like they can't find a job.
That's right.
Or and it's it's a situation where they go to apply, and even at a place that used to be a turnstile type of place, we'll pick on the fast food industry. It's like that's just a constant turnstile of teenagers, and that's how the system has been. You could argue that's broken as well, but
Right.
to the point where someone says, "Okay, I want to apply for that," and they'll look at you and they'll go, "Okay, you're in your mid 30s or early 40s," and they're like, "You're a flight risk. You're only taking this until you go. I don't want to bother with training you." So here's somebody that's willing, able to work, wants to work, and they're not even getting a sniff. And it gets to the point where people are like, you know what? Screw it. I'd rather sleep in a tent and deal with the food bank than have to navigate all that stuff. And what that does to society is it robs society of great people that could do great things for these companies, but they don't want to get into that nonsense of what the job search and job market has been. And I think that's,
Right.
one of the things that jumps out for me, and this is not a commercial by any stretch, of, the work that you're doing at Red Balloon. I get the emails, I see what the types of posts are and the jobs and all of that. And they're real posts. There's
Right.
real people behind it. They might be using ATS, but in the conversations that I've had, with other people that I've like, hey, go check them out. It's like, yeah, I got a call from a real person, and they looked at it, and it was like,
Right.
wow,
Yes.
it's like the olden days when it's like, oh, people working with people. What a weird concept. But because it's frustrating. I've looked for work before, and I've been
Yeah.
on all sides of the fence. Either hiring people or being somebody looking for work as well, and it's it's a lot like buying a car. Now, some people love buying cars. I despise it.
Yeah.
Um,
Most
I
people don't.
yeah, it's like no, it's like the haggling and negotiation. Some people are all in on that, and like I'm gonna get my best deal. Where I'm like, just set a price. I'll pick the vehicle that I can afford. I'll buy it. Make the
Right.
transaction easy. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's like here's the job. Do you have those skill sets? Yes. Okay. Let's talk about your personality.
Yeah.
What's
And culture
important to
fit.
you. And
Yeah. Those
culture
things.
is a huge thing. And
Yeah. Yeah. For
and
sure.
I've shared this story before. I ran multi-site medical care clinics for several years, and I was looking for a receptionist, and I got 900 resumes, and I'm like, okay, how do I go about this? Well, I took the time to look at them, and it took time, but
A
I'm like,
lot.
I am going to look at these, and I got one, and it jumped out all over the others, and the doctors thought I was absolutely bonkers for doing this. But the receptionist that we hired had no medical experience. I turned down other people that had medical experience. She didn't have medical experience. So the doctors are like, "Are you out of your mind? Why are you hiring somebody that doesn't know the industry?" It's like, well, one day somebody hired me as the executive, and I wasn't in healthcare, so
Right.
work with me on this. The reason why I hired her, one was personality. She was outgoing, could handle everything. Secondly, she had worked in for a cell company's customer service retail. So she's dealing with people that are complaining that their iPhone costs too much or that plan isn't working or my this or that. So anything that she's dealing with, unless she's trying to sell somebody on it, she's dealing with unhappy customers. I'm like, you're going to be dealing with unhappy, sick patients. They're going to be mean. They're going to say some
Right.
things that they shouldn't say. Are you okay with that? Yes, I've had this experience with that. So I hired her. So again, doctors were originally mad at her, and she was, and I definitely want to get your thoughts on this. She was commuting a long way to get to our clinic.
Hmm.
She had like almost an hour each way commute, which was a long, for a receptionist role. That's a lot. So she'd been with us for a couple of years. The doctors long forgot about her skills, thought she was an all-star. I was, looking, in the trades and all that kind of stuff, and I saw one of our um, partner clinics, not necessarily a partner, but same kind of group, had an opening for a receptionist role and slash office management type of assistant thing. And that location was 20 minutes from where she lived. So I called the director at that clinic and I said, I got a person. I don't want to lose her, but she lives 20 minutes from you guys. and she's
Right.
absolutely amazing. Would you be willing to interview her? Yes.
Yeah.
So she went on the interview. She got offered the job. She was back and forth on. She did not want to leave us, but I said, okay, you're gaining at least 40 minutes a day. So
Yep.
multiply that. What would you do with that extra time? Um, Sleep in a little bit, get home earlier, do this, that. So long story short, she quit. Doctors are mad at me again how could you get rid of her? So it's gone from why did you hire her to why did you
Yeah.
let her leave?
You gotta trust me, all right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so I've seen everything. And I said, because I wanted what's best for her as an
Right.
individual.
Right.
Long story short, a couple years later, she was promoted to office manager, and now she's assisting running that clinic. So she
Yep.
went from working for a cell phone company as a customer service person to
Yep.
running a medical clinic office. Why?
Yep.
Because I believed that she could do the job.
Well, she
Right.
had the right character, she had the right work
Oh, yeah.
ethic, right? All those things, and you were able to see that. Whereas an ATS, I hate to pick on them because Red Balloon has an ATS, and I'll explain that in a minute. But there's yeah, so much can be missed in that process. And I think what you just explained, which I think is brilliant and wonderful, is hiring is a distinctly human thing. And I think anytime you just try and have the algorithms or AI or any of these things take over DQing people who the algorithm thinks are not a good fit, or communicating in a way that's clearly a machine communicating. I just think it's not kind and it's not human. It is a distinctly human thing to hire other people. So, and I guess to your point, I painted a really bleak picture, and I love your story there. But it took a long time, right? If you've got 900 resumes you're going through, then you've got to go and pitch the doctors that know, trust me, this is going to be the right person for our organization. That's an enormous amount of time commitment. And if you're hiring 20 people, and you want to make sure that they actually work, well, multiply that by 20, and all of a sudden you are a full-time person just trying to hire people, and you're not getting any other work done. So I sympathize with the employers who are like, I need algorithms, I need AI, I need an applicant tracking system to do something, because there is just this hard, reality of amount of hours. So this is what Red Balloon's doing to solve it, because I don't like to paint bleak pictures and say that everything's terrible and then not say what we're doing to solve it, because we think there are ways to solve this. So there's a couple things we're doing right now. So if you're a job seeker, instead of applying to jobs, and you can apply to jobs on Red Balloon if you think you're a good fit, and I will tell you, our employers are different because we coach them up and say, look, your employment brand is really important. And that person who you might not think is a good fit right now might either know someone who is a good fit, or they might be a good fit for you at some point in the future. And if you ghost them, if you treat them as someone not worthy of a response, that's going to tell them a lot about you as an employer and whether they should ever apply for you or even recommend you as an employer. So you need to continue to be thinking about your employment brand and be responding to people, right? So job seekers can apply, or you can just join a talent network or a resume database on Red Balloon. And basically what you're saying is like, look, maybe you have a job today, maybe you don't have a job today, but I would like to be considered for an opportunity that you think as an employer is a good fit for me. And then either employers or our Red Balloon recruiting team will go through that resume database when we have open jobs, and we'll reach out to people and say, look, we think that you're worth an interview for this job. We can't guarantee that you're going to be a good fit, but we think it's worth a conversation. Well, as a job seeker, think how much better of an experience that is. Instead of applying to a job and getting ghosted or rejected, someone's reaching out and saying, look, I don't know if this is a good fit, but I think it's worthy of an interview to have a conversation about this job. Well, that's a way better way to do it. The other thing that we do on the employer side is we can take over that recruiting process. And look, there are recruiters out there, some good recruiters. They're very, very expensive. If you use a traditional outsourced recruiter, you're going to pay 30 to 40% of the first year salary for the person that they're helping you hire. So get ready to write a $30,000 to $40,000 check for them to fill a position for you. Well, Red Balloon thought, man, there's got to be a different way. If we can do this at scale, we can include humans and use computer programs and software to just make the humans more efficient, but not try and take over what is a distinctly human thing of looking someone in the eyes, getting on a video call, actually understanding, you know what, you're a person of character, and while you might not have all the skills today, you're going to be an awesome fit for this company. So we will actually take over that recruitment process, and we will do it for under $10,000. And we've filled CFOs and CEOs, and we've filled executive assistants. When you've got a small business and you know you need the right person, but you don't have the time and energy to do it yourself, we're going to save you tens of thousands of dollars and actually have a human being talk to people who might be a good fit for your company. So that's kind of, and we're trying to build that at scale because we believe that job seekers have the right and the dignity to have a conversation with a human being. And we believe that businesses, if you're a small business, you simply don't have, we estimate it should take 30 hours to run a good hiring process. 30 hours, right? Well, imagine that if you have 10 people you need to hire. Well, most business owners don't have 300 hours that they can devote to hiring. They need to be running their business. And so that's what Red Balloon does. We take over the hiring process. We do it for way less than a traditional recruiter. And we try and give job seekers the dignity of a human conversation because we think they deserve it. And if we can do that at scale and really redeem the world of work and make work fun again, that's really what we're striving for.
Yeah, I'm a gigantic fan of it, and as I said, I've had people look at it. I get the emails because I always want to see what's going out there, and I see the quality of organizations that are in there, and you can tell that and thank you for sharing. I did not know the fact the organization is coaching these organizations because post after post after post, it's like this feels personable. It doesn't
Right.
feel like here's what you need to do. And I'll give you a story. I saw a not because I've done on the side I do some nonprofit help and whatnot, and I saw a job post for a part-time nonprofit director type of role.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the job post and I'm like I started visually trying to count the bullet points of the duties and responsibilities. And I'm like scrolling, I'm like, and my original career was accounting, so I can count, but I'm like, there's too many bullet points. So literally I copied the post, I threw it into ChatGPT, and I said, hey ChatGPT, how many bullet points are in this job post? 57 was the last one. 57. And
Right.
then of course, other duties is assigned, which is that's the
Right.
catch-all.
The
Those
total
other
catch-all. And there's like probably two human beings on the entire planet that check all 57 of those boxes, right?
Yeah, yeah, that was the volunteer board of directors sitting around the board table coming up with a wish list instead
We
of,
should do
okay,
this. We should do that.
what, hire some, what do you want, who are you as an organization and what do you want to do?
Right.
What's your mission? Who do you want to accomplish? What type of person do you want in this role? Not skills. Skills can be taught.
Right.
And we've got countless stories about that. But what do you want that person to be like? What do they need to have from a personality standpoint to be able to succeed in this job and deal with you bozo board members? Did I say that out loud? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Editor,
We have not mentioned names. We will protect the name guilty.
editor, don't remove that. Okay.
That's right.
But again, your organization is helping organizations return to the people business and the human business, and long overdue. And I celebrate, the work that you're doing and important work. And like you said, it's not easy out there, but organizations like you and your team will make it easier. So,
That's
love
right.
this conversation, Andrew. Where can people find out more about you and Red Balloon and everything else you're doing?
Yeah, go to redballoon.work, not .com. That's where you'll find a party supply store. And we actually think work is a good thing. And so that's why we thought redballoon.work would be a good thing. And look, if you're an employer and you want to hire someone who's going to be a great culture fit, and you don't have the 30 plus hours that you need to devote to that whole process, but you don't want to spend $50,000, please reach out to redballoon.work. We believe that there's a better way to hire, and we've done this for many, many hundreds of employers. Also, if you're a job seeker and you find the job hunting prospect just discouraging, go ahead and fill out a profile on redballoon.work. You're now part of a database of job seekers who care about meritocracy and hard work. and showing up and providing value. And you never know, you might just get a tap on the shoulder and say, we have an opportunity that might be a good fit for you. And you don't have to go through all the pain and anguish of rejection while still being involved. There's obviously jobs you can apply to. Would encourage you to do that. And then the last thing I'd say is if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I try and have a daily post about how do you build culture, how do you hire well, how do you interview well in a job. And so have a hopefully good content out there, and that's where I put most of it. So follow me on LinkedIn, Andrew Crapuchettes. There are not a lot of people with that last name out there, so you're pretty safe to know that it's going to be this bald guy.
And I'll definitely have all of that information in the show notes. So, Andrew, thank you for being you. Thank you for this awesome work, and really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me. Everyone, have a great day.
Welcome back. I've got Doug Drysdale. Like, Doug, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Michael. Thanks. How are you? Good to see you.
Great to see you. Really, really looking forward to this conversation as we talked a little bit in the pre-show about this. So, why don't you share a little bit about you, your company, and then we're going to jump into this very important conversation around mental health.
Yeah, happy to do that. And thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing. Like my background, I spent 35 years building drug development companies of some form or other. In the first half, largely through kind of R&D licensing, partnerships, co-developments, those kind of things. And then later through larger transactions, lots of M&A. I've acquired 15, 17 companies, something like that. So building companies organically. But the most rewarding, I think, for the last sort of 16 years or so, I've been the CEO of four different pharma companies, different types of companies, from a generics company I co-founded, a spec pharma company, a CDMO, a contract manufacturer, Cybin, now a biotech company. Two of those were startups and two of those were turnarounds. Two of them were public and two of them were private. So it's a real kind of mix of things. But definitely, I can say that the most rewarding has been the opportunity to grow teams and pull those teams together to deliver things like we're doing at Cybin. And I think that in all of my career in drug development, um, for the most part, it's inevitable that drug development is incremental. We make incremental steps. Science is incremental. We learn a little bit more. Each new product is a little bit better than the one before. But I think for the first time in my career with Cybin, we have something that has the potential to be a real paradigm shift, a massive leap forward, moving away from daily treatment of the signs and symptoms of, say, depression to a more of an interventional treatment that has the potential to rapidly fix depression, remove depressive symptoms. And after just a couple of doses, most patients are seeing benefits lasting at least a year so far in our studies. So a real paradigm shift in the treatment landscape, which is obviously kind of a once in a career type opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. And as I shared with you during the pre-show, and I've shared this on interviews before. I don't know if I've mentioned it on my show though. I'll have to mention it. But I've dealt with burnout in my life and also clinical depression, and was on depression medication for about a year, and was able to successfully wean myself off of that through help with my physician and with therapy and whatnot. But that was a year of my life, and on average, you only get so many runs around the circle, and for me to have to deal with something like this over a year, and I know many people that suffer with depression. It's been a lifelong battle to see the results that you're seeing is I get excited about just thinking about it, because I know what depression did to me. I know what it does to people. It robs them of themselves, and of course that always passes through to where they work, their families, their friends, relationships, every aspect of it. In society suffers from that. When people lose great people because they're depressed and they're not themselves and they're not able to contribute the way that they want to or used to, society suffers from that. So, that's why, it's so important for us to get you on the show, because I want to talk about, this. And obviously, I don't want to I don't want to ignore the fact of, your career, and a question that came to mind as you were, walking us through what you've done all these years is, I don't want to guess that you've seen it all, but you've seen enough, I think, as you're navigating through the landscape of getting approvals and, investors and all these other things, that you can kind of sense what the next question is going to be, the next step's going to be in order to get things approved or clinical trials or anything like that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, first of all, I'm glad you managed to work your way through that challenging time. In some ways, you're lucky that it lasted only a year. Many patients, as you know, find themselves having to turn to antidepressants because the depression needs some help. And then once they're on those antidepressants, struggle to get off of them. Not necessarily that they're addictive, but that they become dependent. It's like a crutch, if you like. And so, and people, as you said, rightly so, people end up spending many years on these treatments, and they were never designed for that. So, and then the other aspect is not just patients, but when we talk to psychiatrists in our studies, it's incredible to see these 20, 30-year psychiatrists who had kind of gotten to a point where they resigned to the fact they had nothing that they could help their patients. So suddenly they're seeing them motivated and energized because suddenly they have new tools that can actually change the course of disease and not just mask the signs and symptoms. Yeah, look, drug development drug development is challenging. Drug development is complex, more complex than most retail investors appreciate. Clinical trials are complex. Our first phase 3 study, 40 sites in a dozen countries, and that brings a huge amount of complexity, as you can imagine. All of that goes on behind the scenes, and the public just sees the outcomes of it. So we're very fortunate to have a really strong team that has developed 60 plus INDs with FDA, many mental health treatments. The team's had something like 37 exits between them. So that means, I think that's a good sign. It shows that they're able to create value for themselves and for investors. But more than anything, this is a cause that really motivates people. So I think pretty much everyone on the team is here because of a personal motivation, a friend, a family, a loved one that has dealt with one of these challenges. So there's that personal motivation, but we're also quite competitive people. It's interesting to me, always interesting to me, that drug development seems like it's glacial and really slow, but actually it's kind of like swan management. Smooth on the surface and paddling like hell underneath. And we're frantically working around the clock to keep things on track. And it's a very competitive group, kind of like a competitive sports team, each contributing their all and also each supporting each other. So we're very fortunate to have the group, and I think the collective insight helps us anticipate what's coming next. As you rightly say, that's the critical in any kind of business, is anticipating what could happen next on the positive side and the negative, and then planning for the next milestones. How do you move the company forward with each of the next steps?
Well, it's important. And as you were talking to, I started thinking about, all of the regulatory things. Of course, you've got the FDA. That's just talking about the U.S. This is a global product, so you've got all the different variances on that. And even in the states, you've got 50 different states, and and licensing and testing and all these other things. It's a situation. It's like, we're just trying to create a treatment, but you end up spending more time on the administrative side of things. To your point, that the modern investor doesn't necessarily understand that. It's like, you're making this new drug or medicine to solve a problem. Okay, they just have visions of labs and scientists. Like, no, well, the mountains and mountains of paperwork to submit that have to be reviewed, working with legal and navigating all of that and translation. And it's a big monster. But it's having said that, you're not letting that get in the way. You're like, okay, we know that's part of the game. We have to do that, but it's important for us to do that because even what you said a moment ago about psychiatrists who have been basically there's a crease in their chair that they've been sitting in because they haven't had to move much because there's only so much that they could do. Now all of a sudden they're like, we've got this new tool that could actually help people really fast. And what that does, just thinking about this from a billing standpoint for a moment, for a doctor or a psychiatrist, the more people you can see, the more revenue that generates. So if you can build up your practice because you're able to help people and get them in and get them out, you're going to have more opportunities to do that. That's just one little side effect of it. I mean, that's not your primary goal for your organization, but that is one of those positive side effects is
Oh
we're
yeah.
helping people.
This treatment has the potential not just to help patients, but to help the entire mental health care system. Um, Depressed patients are quite a high touch, 6 or 9 visits a year to their physician. As you'd expect, they're trying to tweak the dose of their medication, or maybe they're switching to a different one because they can't tolerate the previous one, or they're dealing with side effects like insomnia and they want something for that. Um, or they're more likely to have increased blood pressure, more likely to have diabetes, for example. So there's lots of comorbidities and lots of system interaction. Um, the other aspect is that we have a pretty limited number of psychiatrists in the US and in pretty much everywhere, actually. And only about 18% of psychiatrists are available to see new patients because these patients take so much time. Um, and an average wait time for a new visit is something like 40 to 70 days, depending whether you want a virtual visit or an in-person one. So when you think about what we're trying to develop here is an opportunity to dose patients once or twice and then keep them out of the system for at least a year so far, we're seeing in the data. That means no going back for dose adjustments because patients aren't taking any daily meds. No going back for side effect tolerance because they're not taking daily meds. No going back for comorbidities because they're not taking daily meds. And so keeping them out of the system frees up all these other resources for new patients. I mean, even in the interventional psychiatry space, where we see treatments like ECT, TMS, esketamine, Spravato, in these interventional psychiatry centers, those are high frequency treatments. Esketamine is dosed 26 times a year, so patients are coming in every 2 weeks. That's pretty tough on these centers that have very limited space. So if we can reduce 26 visits to 2, these sites can see a lot more patients. We can deal with the problem a lot more efficiently.
Agreed. And we know the stats of, people that are really struggling, just, case in point, I saw a stat the other day, it's, we're just at the time of this recording, we're just ending, the holiday season. So there's a lot of people that'll be getting their credit card bills in the next week or so. And there's financial stress, and the stress causes depression because they feel bad about overspending, or they feel bad that they can't, make the payments on time. And of course, that can get you down a rabbit hole of depression and anxiety and self-doubt and all of these things. And a lot of this, I mean, a lot of people, especially when I was going through it, you realize that a lot of that is just your brain and chemical challenges and whatever that's adding fuel to the fire type of situation. And to be able to take that and not quote unquote mask it with the pills that I was taking for a year, but to actually have something that can adjust things and correct it where, like you said, a visit or two, and all of a sudden I'm good for a year so far, because it changes things. And again, it opens up the door because, again, I see so many people just in my daily walk of life where I could tell people are having a tough go of it. And I don't know necessarily what the reasons are. I do know that they're having a tough go of it. And I don't, my hope is that they'll be able to get the help that they need. But as you said, there's a long wait list to talk with a mental health specialist, even with the advent of remote therapies and whatnot. There's still a wait period. And then, of course, there's cost involved and all of that, where, the work that your team is doing and the innovative work that it's been doing is creating an opportunity for people to get this help a lot faster, a lot healthier. You don't have to worry about, okay, well, we're giving you this, but now, your A1C levels are going through the roof, or, oh, congratulations, you're going to bust the heart, rate, and your watch is going to be yelling at you because your blood pressure is going through the roof. You won't have that. And I used to work in primary care as an executive, so I see the patients coming in, and I know the challenges they're having, and a lot of it is, basically playing whack-a-mole, and that's tough on a doctor because they have to figure out, all right, what are all these different combinations of things, and to be able to use, what your team has come up with. Again, it excites me. I'm thrilled that the work that you've done, and obviously you're leveraging all the experience you've had. But I'm thrilled for this because I know what this means for humanity. If we can get people away from being depressed and help reduce anxiety and other mental health challenges, people will be happier and healthier. And what a world will that be when we can get there?
Yeah, no question. And obviously there's a big link between metabolic health and mental health. Um, we know that what people eat affects their mental state. The metabolic health or poor diet leads to reduced mitochondrial function. That leads to reduced mental function because we have 3 times as many mitochondria in our brain than we do in the rest of the cells in our body, and vice versa. When people are depressed, it affects their metabolic health as well for similar kind of connected reasons. So the two are kind of hand in hand. It's hard to fix your metabolic health and all those other things like diabetes, as you mentioned, if the mental health isn't on track, and vice versa. So the problems run deep, and I think, as you said earlier, mental health is kind of like an infectious disease. It doesn't just affect that individual, but the loved ones, their carers, their colleagues, their friends. It's very hard to know how to help someone that is suffering. There's really nothing much that we can do, and certainly the old kind of snap out of it attitude, clearly it doesn't work. So we're very excited about the potential for this, and we're well into our phase 3 program now, focused on executing that. You're right, and you said there's lots and lots of hurdles and barriers. Simple things like drug scheduling, where every site and every vendor and every partner has to have a Schedule 1 license. Adds complexity, it adds cost. But we have a team of professionals, and we've been dealing with that for the last 4 or 5 years now, and we're just powering on through.
Yeah, that kind of leads into a question I was going to ask to towards wrap up is, and I already kind of know the answer to this, but what's the long-term vision on this? From your standpoint, obviously I think this will spawn additional research in other areas as well. But what's the long-term strategy for the organization to navigate? And again, it helps when you have an all-star team that's done it before. It's not a case where nothing surprises you. It's like, okay, we know how to deal with this, and they do it. And I love seeing organizations that are made up that way because it strengthens the opportunity to quote unquote get things right. So love to hear your long-term strategy.
Look, I mean, we're fortunate in that depression studies can be quite challenging, typically, in that when you're dosing patients every day with a psychiatric condition, and then you're comparing that to a dose of placebo, those placebo patients are getting some kind of positive input, if you like, or, so they're taking this placebo, some reinforcement, if you like, and so the placebo effect can be quite large in these studies, and then you get a failure to separate the active treatment from placebo, typically normally because these treatments have fairly small effects historically. We've got 2 things working in our favor here. One is we're seeing much, much larger effects, 8 to 10 times larger than with traditional standard of care, and we're not dosing every day in our studies, nor with placebo. So the separation risk is gone. We've seen just tremendous results in phase 2, 70+% remission rate, at 12 months, 100% response rate at 12 months after 2 doses. So going into phase 3, we've removed a lot of the risk. So now it's all about execution. When we think about the long term, this is just the beginning of a platform. So we know that these treatments very likely will be successful in depression, anxiety disorders, but there's plenty of anecdotal and academic evidence to show that there are many other conditions that these could be helpful for as well. Bipolar disorder, OCD, postpartum depression, cluster headache, migraine, neuropathic pain, substance use, opioid use, alcohol use. I mean, these are conditions that collectively affect in the US alone maybe a couple of 100 million people. So we're not talking about niche applications here. We're talking about mainstream applications on the scale of, the GLP-1s, Wegovy, et cetera. Ultimately, once we look a few years down the road. So our hope is to focus on this phase 3 approval in depression, and then leverage off of that experience and the impact we can have on the depressed patient community, and leverage that to help many more people with a lot of other conditions. And really try to change the mindset to move away from daily chronic dosing of pills every day to something that's more interventional. You mentioned whack-a-mole. I think it's exactly right. It doesn't matter what condition you're treating, if it's depression or a cardiovascular disease or whatever. As soon as patients start getting polypharmacy, multiple pills, then it's about, okay, well, this one's causing this side effect, this one's interacting with this one's causing another side effect, and you're adding in more treatments to deal with the treatments that are trying to attack the underlying condition. So, one major benefit of all this is maybe let's break the cycle of relying on a pill every day. Patients have to come in and do a bit of work and have a couple of visits and take these treatments, but 2 visits could perhaps last patients for an entire year, free from all those medications. So I mean that's the vision, to create a platform, and we're very very excited about the opportunity to help not just depressed patients but all those other groups I mentioned as well.
Yeah, I look forward to people throwing away their pill dispensers because they don't
Mhm.
need them anymore. So I applaud your work and celebrate it, and I'm looking forward to seeing all the great things that comes from all of this. So, Doug, love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Yeah, look, thanks for having me on, Michael. Enjoyed the conversation. You can always find us at cybin.com. That's cybin.com. And if you happen to be an investor, we're also traded on the New York Stock Exchange at CYBN as the ticker symbol.
And I'll definitely have all that information in the show notes. So, Doug, thank you and your entire team for your part in helping people get better. I applaud you and I really appreciate your time today.
Great. Thanks, Michael.
Welcome back. I've got Rico Nasal on the line. Rico, how are you?
I'm good, good. How are you this morning?
I am doing really well. Been looking forward to this conversation. We lined this up as we were joking in the pre-show. Feels like 2015, which would be impressive because I didn't start the show till 2017, but here we are. So, for those that don't know you, why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Rico Nasol. I've been a creative executive for the last 20 years. I spent most of my time at Zappos and Netflix. At Zappos, I was employee number 40, and I had to scale, and I founded the creative and content team there. It was, I guess, a theme in my career because at Netflix, I was there for 9 years, did the same thing. I founded and headed their Netflix creative studio. And so what I do now is I started leaning into the coaching and leadership aspects of that because I had to scale to 200 people, 7 countries. And in doing that, I had to build my own leadership teams. And so I found myself leaning more into building more leaders around me. And so I decided to leave Netflix in 2021 and start my leadership coaching business. So now I focus on training the leaders of tomorrow and building them up and helping them build the confidence, clarity, and culture they need to be successful.
I love that you recognize that by building up leaders as part of your team, it probably not that you didn't have enough work to do, but it probably made it just a little bit easier because you've empowered your people to lead and take charge of things, because that's how you can scale organizations to multiple countries and rapid growth. And the fact that you were employee number 40 at Zappos, and we know what that company is, and of course doing the same thing at Netflix, we certainly know who they are. And you'd have to just completely avoid media not to understand what Netflix does. But the fact that you were in both of those organizations in the early days, and obviously watch it grow and expand to, household names and, just gigantic companies making a huge impact on people. It's got to be gratifying for you. And also, just another thing to commend you on too, and I want to hear your thoughts on this is, the fact that you did all these things and then you said, you know what, I can do that at Netflix too, because you picked up tools along the way. So what was that process like as you were building things up and recognizing, okay, I need to make my leaders leaders and, to scale this thing to where we need it to get?
Yeah, great question. I had a lot of mistakes along the way, and that's where I built this course, right? Because there's no perfect way to be a leader, and I would say I'm a product of my environment. I think that's how all of us are. So I was the drum major in my marching band, which like I was the number one band geek. I played a lot of sports, and then I was lucky enough to work with Tony Shea, the late Tony Shea, who really was the embodiment of like empowering others. So it was good because my first experience was in an environment that true autonomy, true empowerment, and in between, I didn't mention the stops in between because that's where I learned what toxic environments were like. So taking the good that I found at Zappos, it took me a while to find Netflix because Zappos was in Las Vegas. I was married. We wanted to live back in California, and I found a few bumpy spots along the way. And so I found micromanagers, I found toxic leaders, and nobody goes out and says like, "Hey, I want to be a toxic leader." I want to create toxic environments. But like I mentioned, people are products of their environment. So if they don't know any better, and a lot of these companies don't have great training programs, what I've seen is a lot of companies will take the best performing IC who's maybe good at the process and promote them as their leader. And it's one thing to manage process, but as we all know, leadership is about leading people. And so if you just were in charge of process, great. But if you need to inspire and motivate people, nobody's training these folks how to do that. So one of the things I had to learn was, one, I can't do my old job and my new job at the same time. So I needed to find people to do the stuff I used to do, and then really build succession plans. Train your replacements. If you can train your replacements, that means one, you can move on to do other jobs. You could get promoted yourself. And then two, if you wanted to take a break, because I know you focus a lot on burnout, if you want to take a vacation, who's going to do your job when you're gone for a week, right? If you don't have a good succession plan. So those are probably the biggest things I learned. And if I can leave my job and the business doesn't skip a beat, that means I was successful.
It's so important, and so many organizations they don't invest any time in training, and they've made the mistake time and time again. Okay, you are amazing as a product development person. Okay, you're going to lead the department now. Well, I've never led a person in my life. I don't even have kids. So what's this going to be like? And you'll do it because you know the product. Well, you're not, like you said, and I appreciate you said this. You're not leading the product. You're leading people. You're not doing the work anymore. You are leading people that are doing that work. And often there's the inner struggle of, no, it should be done this way. And there's multiple ways to get to an end result. So the great leaders that I've encountered, once they become great leaders, some are, I don't want to say some are born, but some have some attributes that make them gravitate to be better at leaders than others. Doesn't mean people that don't have that can, they can be a great leader. It's something they have to learn and study from the greats and research and, don't be a follower, as Jim Rohn has said, make your own decision, so take some ingredients from all the great leaders or the people that you admired or your former bosses and use some of those components in your leadership style, and you'll be amazing at it because it's got some principles of leadership, but it's also got you in there. And that makes it so much easier. But organizations don't invest time in training their leaders. So the leaders have to do it themselves, or it's trial by fire, or if they're talking with peers. But a lot of times they're so overwhelmed with all the workload and the struggle of leading and not doing. It's such a difficult challenge for so many people. And that's why we see all the problems we're seeing in workplaces, whether it's micromanagement, stress, burnout, retention issues. All of these things are playing a part. And a big component of it, from my standpoint, is just improper or bad leadership. And it's like you said earlier too, and I want to commend you on this as well. Most people, I mean, there are some, but most people don't set out to say, you know what, I'm going to be a bad leader. I'm going to be a micromanager. I'm going to just annoy the heck out of these people. That's not their intent. Many of them are internally drowning. They're fear, they're scared. They're basically putting on a fake face to say, I have to show myself as being a strong leader. It's like, well, you need to be who you are. So you're not fighting this internal battle of trying to pretend to be somebody that you're not. Be you and figure out your leadership style that can help motivate and grow the business.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that's one of the things I like to focus on in my coaching practice and in my course is leadership is about authenticity, right? Like you can't be something you're not. And you said something there when, leaders are born. I do believe leaders are born. Some people say like leaders aren't born, leaders are made, but I believe leaders are born because we all have innate skills and strengths. And it's about fostering those strengths and bringing those things out and knowing that they bring value to the organization, the team, and whatever. And the thing that gets a lot of people hung up is we talked about this in the pre-show, whether they have imposter syndrome, they have low self-worth, they don't have confidence in themselves, they don't believe that they have value. And if you start to get into that negative self-talk, that's when you start to make the mistakes as a leader. You start to take on too much, you start to information hoard, you start to do the things that aren't natural, but because we're afraid of failing, we're afraid of making a mistake, we're afraid of the team looking bad. If the team makes a mistake, that means I made a mistake, that means I'm a bad leader. But when you hold on so tightly, that's when we start to fail our teams. It's when you let them tier what you said earlier. You just need to tell them, get from point A to point B. You figure out how you get there. I just want to make sure we get to point B. And when folks have like this fear of failure, they hide behind things like perfectionism. They hide behind things like, oh, I want to add more rigor. And when people say they want to add more rigor, secretly, a lot of them are saying, oh, I just need more people so I can make a decision through consensus, because they're afraid to make a mistake. And so these things start to creep out unknowingly. And it takes someone to recognize, oh, actually, I want to be a better leader, to say, okay, I have imposter syndrome, I have these things. And it's hard to admit it. But once you can admit that, that's when the doors open to great leadership.
It's really important. I know John Maxwell talks about this a lot, in his book, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. Going back to, you had mentioned it earlier about, the stops in between Zappos and Netflix weren't the greatest, and we don't need to pay any attention or mention any names or anything like that. But those are learning experiences. And I tell people, it's like if everything was smooth and easy, we wouldn't be challenged. We wouldn't grow. And I know a lot of people, use the adage, no pain, no pain. And it's just natural. We want to avoid it, where our bodies are kind of designed to avoid discomfort and pain whenever we can. But it's those things that provide clarity, and it gives you opportunity saying, okay, now I know that working in this particular sector, or maybe this particular area, most of the companies behave this way. All right, maybe I should look elsewhere to work, or maybe change industries, or take a step back and go, all right, maybe I need to regain something, especially if there's a confidence issue. And I even did this in my career earlier on, where, I was in leadership roles, had a setback, and was looking for new roles. And one of the things I did, and, not everybody will do this, but for me, it's like, you know what, I'm going to take a part-time role doing something that I did years ago. So, we're, I want to say bottom of the ladder, but it was lower. And it was more of for me personally, to say, yeah, I've got the confidence, I've got the skills, get really good. It was so funny too, because this organization said, you've got management material, or you're really good. And not knowing that, and I didn't lie in my resume. I just didn't go into great details as far as titles and all of that. But I'm like, I used to run a department like this with 3 times the number of people that you have in here. So I know everything there is to know about it. But I didn't tell them that. I just said, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And just continue to get good at it again, just to kind of build up my self-courage and remind myself of who the heck I was. And then, shortly after that, then the doors opened up, as you mentioned before, to a position that was a whole lot better, in my wheelhouse where my skill set was, but also challenged me into learning some new things. And it was just one of those, it's not a straight line. Sometimes you gotta go, okay, let's take a step back, kind of regain things, and then, okay, let's get back into the game. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually really good because it reinforces some things, and it may, you may determine, go, you know what, I actually like working in this industry again, so maybe I'll do that. It's our playground. We can do whatever we want. And as leaders, you have that autonomy to do that. But as great leaders, you allow your people to do that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, to your point, when you step back, it kind of gives you another perspective, right? So there's a few types of people I work with. There's some in particular that I feel like, oh, the only way to grow is through people management. And I had many leaders on my team that didn't manage any people, but they were mentors. The rest of their peers saw them as leaders. And I always made sure that there was a high level IC path, an individual contributor path, because there's only so many people manager roles, right? You can't just make some. So in some cases, you find ways to elevate others where they don't necessarily have to go into people leadership, but they're seen as leaders. And then there's other folks to what you mentioned, where, and also I wanted to bring up is taking that step back to change perspective. I had to do that myself. And I'll tell a little story at Netflix where we would do quarterly offsites for quarterly planning, and it's like a bunch of VPs, and we're in there, and I'm like I was only one of the only creative executives in this meeting. And so I had to shift myself because in my mind, I'm like, why am I in this meeting? Like everybody here is like business owners and like whatever and I'm like, I'm a creative. And so during the break, I had to shift myself and say, why am I in this room? What does it mean that I'm in this room? And when I answered that, it's like, I'm the only creative in this room. That means if I don't say anything, I'm letting down all the creatives in the organization because my voice is probably the most important because it's the least represented. And so by shifting that mindset and helping a lot of my clients shift that mindset, is your voice is probably the most important, especially if you're the only one representing that function in the room. So look at it that way and share your perspective, share your voice, share the things that you're thinking, the questions that you have. And I went from not saying much and being scared to say something not smart to no, my perspective and my opinion is important.
I love that you basically reframed the question. Your first instinct was, why am I in here? And you reframed it to is, what's the reason why I'm in here? And the reason is because they need me to share from my perspective and my background that they don't necessarily have, some insights that they're not going to see, which is going to strengthen whatever initiatives the organization as a whole is trying to roll out. The ideas that you provided literally could have created additional millions, if not billions, in revenue. And if you weren't in that room, that may not have happened. So you ask basically the same question, why am I in here? But it's why am I in here is because I can offer this value, not the self-doubt thing. But you caught yourself and you reframed that thing. So you looked at it from a different perspective, and you provided a ton of value. Not taught, I don't know anybody else in that room, but you provided a ton of value, which made a huge impact on that organization. And that's again one of those things when we have that self-doubt and negative talk and imposter syndrome kind of thing. You have to realize where have I been? Where am I at now? I mean, sure, if you were, and I'm not picking. Let's say I'm not even going to pick a title because I don't want to make fun of any title because every person's work is important. Like the old adage when President Kennedy was touring NASA and Cape Canaveral, and he walked up to a janitor and he said, "Hi, I'm President Kennedy. What's your name?" The guy said his name. Said, "What do you do here?" And his role was janitor. And he says, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." Yeah, and it's true. Because if that place wasn't clean, it could create problems for the rockets, which would have created problems, which could have killed astronauts and everything else. So that janitor was true. So it's the same thing. Whenever we have that imposter syndrome, remind ourselves we are an important part of this company or of this community or of this country or wherever you happen to be. Everyone here has gifts, and I'm glad you made the comment about born leaders, and it's definitely for me to reframe that as well personally. So I appreciate that and thank you for that. But it's so many people hold back, and once people kind of open up and offer their insights and stuff, all the great innovations and inventions that we've had throughout humanity came about because people opened up and offered their ideas and suggestions. Because if we didn't, who knows how behind we would be based on where we are now in the world as far as technology, communication, transit, you name it. Those all came from ideas that people spoke up and offered something. Because if they didn't, we wouldn't have anything that we have today.
Yeah, absolutely. It just reminded me of this story that I have, and it's actually part of the thing I want to offer to your audience. I know we're going to talk about this later, but I have this journal. It's called the Crush Imposter Syndrome Journal that we'll give the URL later. But what it does, it helps you work through those things, because you're right. If people didn't speak up, then one, some things might not have been invented, or some terrible inventions might have been stopped, right? And some of the things that this journal helps you do, it helps you go through what's triggering your feeling, like when you're feeling this imposter syndrome, what is it that you're feeling, and starts to look at hard facts, right? So what evidence do you have? So here's an example, right? So a person might be saying, oh, like my boss hasn't spoken to me in 6 weeks, right? So what somebody could say is like, oh, he must hate me. I'm going to get fired because my boss hasn't spoken to me in 6 weeks. But what could it be? What else could it be? Could it be that your boss is actually really happy with your performance and that he doesn't have to speak to you, right? So like, it's all about changing our frame of mind and really understanding what are our triggers and what do we know to be true, right? So if you do speak up in that meeting, what can happen? And the things that I used to be afraid of is speaking up in meetings is like, oh, I'm going to say something dumb. Someone's going to not like it and I'm going to get fired. And then I have to ask myself, how many times has that happened? Out of the hundreds of times I've said anything, how many times have I said something not smart and gotten fired? 0. How many times have people nodded their heads and said they agree and like that's a good point? More often than not. So the truth is, the reality is, when I do speak, people value the opinion. The fear that I have is that the one time out of a million is going to be that one time where I say something not smart. And that's when we get in our own way. Like we have this fear. That's when the imposter syndrome comes out. We think the worst thing will happen. But what I'm asking people to do is think is what is the best thing that can happen? Maybe you save the company $2 million, which is a true story for me.
Yeah, it's fun to save money because for all the accountants and bean counters that listen to the show, they get this part because so many businesses, and I've done a ton of work in nonprofits. Nonprofits are always looking for revenue. They're always looking, how can we raise more money? How can we get more donations? All of that, which is, a key component for them to address the needs that their particular nonprofit does. But for me, in my original career was accounting, whenever I helped out those organizations, like, okay, you have your people that are really good at fundraising and all that stuff, let them be. But let me go look at some cost savings. Let's go see what we can find. And, I saved a nonprofit, smaller amount than that, but it was still $250,000 annually on renegotiating some contracts that we were allowed to renegotiate. And by doing that, we were able to launch a new program, hire 3 people to run that program, and provide additional community service in an underserviced area. That's one of those things that, of all the things that I've done in my career, that's one of those things that I am quite proud of. I'm proud of a lot of things and thrilled that I was given the opportunity to be able to do those things. But that's one that sticks out to me a lot because we didn't let anybody go. We didn't fire anybody. We didn't cut programs. We found some savings and then passed that along into bringing on additional people to do jobs that they love doing and impacting the community. And it can be corporate, it can be nonprofit, it can be in your own home. It's just one of those things where when you find opportunities and you speak up and you say things, it creates opportunities. So take those opportunities to find opportunities and grow as a leader. Doesn't matter where you are in an organization. If your organization doesn't invest in leadership, you can. It's never been easier. If you have a commute, there's YouTube University. You can listen to podcasts like this one or the billion others that are out there. You can read book and, a good segue, take your course as well. So why don't you share a bit about your course that you have?
Yeah, so it's called the Seven Figure Leader, and it goes over the 3 C's that I developed, and I mentioned them earlier, over the course of my career. So it's focusing on confidence, clarity, and culture. So those are the 3 modules. And really, if I was going to say, the whole thing is based on confidence, because the first part talks about imposter syndrome, the things that we're afraid of, like a lot of the themes that we talked about today. And the second part in clarity, it really talks about how to set a mission, vision, and their values for your team. Because as leaders, we're the ones who set that culture, right? And then the last part is the culture piece, where we talk about how to use coaching, mentorship. It kind of ties all the modules together, right? So it's a 12-week course. You get some one-on-one time with me, and I have folks going through it now. And I used it to place a lot of the leaders that I trained at Netflix went through the same exact program during my time there. So it's tried and true. It's been tested and proven. I've made all the mistakes for you, so you don't have to. You can learn from all the mistakes that I made over the past 20 years. And then there's a book that's going to be coming out. It's in editing now. So maybe when this is out, by the time this is out, people can pick it up. You can find all that information at riconasol.com. And then the free download that I mentioned for the listeners here for the Crush Imposter Syndrome Journal, it's riconasol.com/leaders. You can download it free there. It's a great resource. It's a 7 days to crush imposter syndrome journal.
I really appreciate that. And I highly encourage everybody listening, go get that resource and sign up for the course. And then, when the book gets out, I'll make sure to update the show notes to have a link to the book as well. Because leadership is so desperately needed. And even if you're not, a senior VP or a C-suite executive, let's say you're middle management, or maybe you're even on the front lines, you're still a leader of life. You're a leader of your work area. You're a leader of interacting with your customers, clients, patients, whatever you identify the people that buy or you serve. You add these things, you get rid of that imposter syndrome, because everybody struggles with it. Doesn't matter what they do. If you can get on top of that and reframe what's coming up into your mind to remind yourself of who the heck you are. Usually I say a profane word, but I'm not going to drop that one here. I'll give you a hint. It starts with the letter F. Just remember who you are, because you have accomplished so much in your life, and you still got a lot to do. And this book and these resources and this course will be a great thing for you. So Rico, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, I'll put all that information in the show notes. Really appreciate you. Congratulations on your career thus far and all this amazing work you're continuing to do.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it, Michael. And yeah, it was great being here. Great chatting with you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Founder Story. I had already had a great conversation with Michael D. Levitt, but he's the Chief Burnout Officer, global thought leader. He's talking about HR, burnout, workplace culture. These are things that we've gone through for decades, but since COVID, it's become really prevalent. I know I've dealt with it. My friends have dealt with it, whether you're a founder, whether you're in corporate. And he's also the top global podcast for thought leadership. Well, Michael, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you today, Daniel.
So why did you launch Breakfast Leadership Network? And why are you so passionate about helping people with burnout?
I had my own personal burnout journey back in 2009, where over a period of 369 days, so just over a year, I had a heart attack that should have killed me. And then 17 weeks later, I lost my job during the Great Recession. and then my family car was repossessed, and then finally my home was foreclosed. All those things happened to me in about a year, and all those things happened to me because I was burned out. I was making mistakes at work. I wasn't taking care of myself physically or mentally or spiritually. Obviously, when you lose your job, it's kind of hard to make the mortgage and car payments. Even today, it's hard to make mortgage and car payments or rent payments, even if you are working and you haven't had a cardiac event. So it's a difficult time for a lot of people. And after recovering from all of that and realizing, okay, I'm very fortunate, I don't want to ever go through that again. After I went through the exercise of understanding what happened to me and getting back on my feet, I started noticing people in my sector, and I used to work in healthcare, were going down the same path I did. And it scared me. And I thought, I can't allow this to happen. So I started talking with people, started writing blog articles about it. And then in a conversation with a trusted colleague, he said, you've got some consulting experience. Why don't you start doing some consulting on this? And I did. And then that led to keynote talking, to launching the podcast in 2017, to writing books about burnout, my own personal burnout journey, and created Breakfast Leadership because I was working mostly originally with C-suite executives, and the best time to get hold of those people early in the morning before they get into the trenches, because once they're in the trenches, good luck. You're not going to get their attention. They're too focused on doing what they're doing. And if you start off the day the right way with some techniques on how to mitigate your stress so it doesn't become prolonged stress, you're going to have a good fighting chance of beating burnout.
So it sounds like you've been helping people for many years with burnout. So you've seen the changes going from pre-pandemic, during the pandemic to now. What are some of those changes that you've seen? And is it different? Is it different if it's a founder or person working in the company or an executive?
There's different variations of how it impacts, but burnout doesn't really care what type of job you're doing. The World Health Organization, who we've heard from over the last few years, prior to the pandemic, actually issued an ICD code, which is a disease code, for workplace burnout. They didn't classify burnout as a disease, but they called it a workplace phenomenon. And their definition basically says it happens when you have prolonged stress and you're overwhelmed with life and you can't keep up with the demands of life. And if you go into a room of 100 people, I'm going to guess 90 to 95% of the people are going to raise their hand saying, yeah, I'm experiencing that, or I've experienced that recently. And prior to the pandemic, because I started the organization before that, there was a lot of people that are burning out, but they weren't talking about it as much. And unfortunately, there's a mental health component to it, and there's still a stigma about mental health. And if you're a C-suite executive, a Fortune 500 or a publicly traded company, and the word gets out that, oh, the CEO of ABC company is burning out, what's going to happen to their stock? So you have to be really quiet on who you're talking with and who you're working with, and they're afraid to share that kind of information with anybody. So it really becomes a problem. Fast forward to the pandemic. Initially, at least during the first couple months of the pandemic, I thought, okay, I think we may have a solution here where people can take a step back and just kind of reevaluate what they do and reprioritize, because we had to. We had to figure out new ways to work remotely if we hadn't done that before. And hopefully that would break down some silos and simplify some things. And I was gravely mistaken on my assessment that I thought burnout might ease up. It was literally, burnout was a fire, and somebody decided to go to the gas station and buy barrels and barrels of fuel and just dump on the flame. And it's been horrific what we've seen over the last few years. Industries, you name it, education, healthcare, legal, grain elevator farmers, orthodontists, dentists, every industry. People are burning out at alarming rates, and it's happening faster. Health concerns are happening to younger people. The number of millennials that are having cardiac events or heart attacks, under age 40 is skyrocketing. And that scares me, because that's a long life if you survive, hopefully you do, of taking heart medications and all the other things that you got to do. And it's like it's shortening lifespans. It's such a horrible thing. So the pandemic made it worse, and it frustrates me. And what I've been doing with organizations, and why I added the workplace culture and the environment, because it's the environment. If the environment is healthy, there's a fighting chance you're not going to burn out, because the stress will be managed. If you're not managing your stress, either with your teams or yourself as a leader or a founder, you're running the risk of burning out.
Yeah, we've had someone on recently, and they were talking around like the amount of death increases from stress, and just how stress causes so many issues in our bodies. And it's like with technology, you think we'd be living longer, we'd be less stressed, but it seems like we're even more stressed now, which is burnout and all these things. And I remember working in the corporate environment, going through the same thing. When you're trying to move up in the ranks, or when you start a company, you have to work a lot, and you have to go through a lot of stressful events, which I think lead to this burnout. So what are you seeing when it comes to people when they start companies? And obviously when you're in that startup mode, you're working a lot, you're working a ton, and that startup mode could lead for, could be a few years. What are you seeing when people start companies when it comes to burnout?
Yeah, real quick, the majority of chronic diseases, and I used to work in healthcare, the majority of chronic diseases, stress is a major factor in them happening. Diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure, all the things that we see with people that have chronic diseases, stress is a common element. And if you don't know how to manage it, it can be problematic. For founders and new business starts and solopreneurs and all of that, there's an underestimate of how many hours you're going to have to put in. And you say, okay, I'm going to be a consultant for attorneys on this. Okay, great. Doing that in the face-to-face and working with legal and talking with them about whatever you're consulting on is great. However, the running of a business, there's so many different things you have to do. You have to look at branding, online marketing, websites, hiring if you have enough revenue coming in to bring in people, outsourcing. Even with the new technologies that we're seeing now with AI, everybody's like, oh, it's going to make it simpler. And to your point, technology, and I think in many ways, has made things more complex instead of making it easier, because one, and especially with AI right now, we're overwhelmed with options and choices. We don't know where to even start. And if you subscribe to 2 or 3 AI newsletters, they're going to throw at you maybe 50 or 100 AI tools. So you're going to get overwhelmed, and you're going to stress out just by the choices, the multiple choices. And a lot of entrepreneurs, unfortunately, try to do everything. And if you try to do everything, you're going to do nothing. You're not going to accomplish anything. So understand it is a marathon and not a sprint. I know in many cases when people launch businesses, they're doing it out of financial necessity. Maybe they were laid off, or they're tired of working where they work, and they're starting this on the side, basically. And sometimes people are like, I got to get this job going and running fast and making a bunch of money right away. The odds are against you in making a lot of money initially, unless you find something that is spot on what the market needs right now and there's high demand. If you find that, congratulations. That is rare. But you can make money in the long run, but you have to prepare and kind of get set up in a way where you can be successful along the way. You have to learn how to say no, and that's really hard, especially when you're trying to get customers. Those first few, you're going to say yes to everything under the sun because you need the revenue, you need the money to build the company and all of that. And that's a common thing I see with people is they make decisions that seem like good decisions, but they overwhelm themselves. And then it gets to the point where they're so overwhelmed, you start missing things, you start making mistakes, you're not clear-headed. And when you're running a business, clarity is king. If you don't have that, you don't have an idea of where you're going and how to pivot or adjust when things like, I don't know, pandemics and inflation hit, you're going to be in deep trouble.
Wow. Yeah. It's a lot. It can be, I think it's very overwhelming. Like you had just talked about, just everything is overwhelming. Like you're saying, it's advancing in technology, and then you have the economy, then you have to make money, and you have to provide for, like, there's so many things that we have to deal with internally, and working on those things can be very challenging. I think most people don't seek help. They just go through it.
Right.
And as you go through it, it just gets worse and worse and it builds up. So I'm glad that you were helping people. Love the show that you have. So if people want to get in touch with you, they want to listen to your show, they want to get you for keynote speaking, they want to see about your consulting, how can they do so?
Best place is go to breakfastleadership.com, and up at the top there's links to all kinds of different resources. They'll even get an annoying pop-up if they want a copy of my Burnout Proof book. I'll email it to them, and it's a quick read, and that's intentional. I didn't want to create a Tim Ferriss Tool of Titans mammoth book because that's only consumable in chunks. I wanted people to get through the book quickly so they can quickly make adjustments so they no longer burn out, because burnout robs society of everything. It robs people, it robs families, it robs businesses, it robs all of us of great products and services. So I'm doing my part to eradicate burnout and love all the help that I can get.
Well, thank you, Michael. I can tell you're all about impact, and you want to impact millions of people. I can tell, and they need it. So I hope that they go and they check it out. And thank you for being here today on Founder Story.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Welcome back. I've got Chuck Wachendorfer on the line. Chuck, how are you?
Doing well, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Great, great. And we're going to add Doug to this conversation too. So let's welcome in Doug real quick. Hello, Doug. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Sorry. Glad to be here. Hello, everybody.
Hello, great. We just started, so perfect timing to jump into the show. So, Doug Lennox and Chuck, why don't you introduce yourselves, and then we'll dive into this conversation about this great new book you've released.
Sure. My name's Chuck Wachendorfer. Doug and I are partners in a business called Think to Perform. It's a business and sports performance firm. We work with executives, athletes, business owners, doctors and nurses in surgery, the FBI, to improve decision-making under pressure. We're about 21 years old. And then he and I authored a book that we'll be talking about here today called Don't Wait for Somebody Else to Fix It. It was published April 4th by Wiley.
Yep, and I'm Doug Lennox, and I, as Chuck mentioned, we've been in business together. We started Think to Perform as a 21-year-old company, and prior to us joining this company, forming this company, both of us had careers in the financial services industry. So we have executive life in financial services for what that's worth.
Well, those are skills that definitely pay dividends. Going through my original career was public accounting, and it's amazing how many skills I picked up along the way that I use even today. So it's, having a financial background definitely can help with decisions, and especially, making those difficult decisions that we so run into. So congratulations, organization, is 21, so a legal adult now. So that's good. But yeah, and still young, but it's awesome that you guys have launched this amazing business. And then of course you're writing this book, and in the pre-show, when Chuck and I were talking for a couple of minutes, I said the title of the book alone is definitely, you see it on the bookshelf, you're going to grab it and you're like, okay, what's this about? So why don't you start with what motivated you to write the book?
We feel well, first of all, we work our clients we work with our clients to develop their leadership effectiveness. And as Doug mentioned, we've spent decades in leadership roles ourselves. We have been consulting and coaching executives and business owners around the world to improve their own leadership effectiveness. We've also benefited from our own mentors and people who've come before us, people who've written great books like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And so we felt a responsibility to extend what we've learned, what has benefited so many of the people that we've worked with into this book. And part of our vision at Think to Perform is to enhance the world by improving the decision-making and performance of the individuals and organizations we touch. And so we've been working for the last 21 years to enhance the world, and people can't always hire Doug or myself or other people in our company So we try and provide the tools and the content in different ways. So we have a YouTube channel, we have an audio library, we have workbooks, we have values cards, but then we wanted to put everything that we think is timeless that can help anybody anywhere improve their lives or the lives of people that they care about. And so that's kind of the genesis of the book. We wanted to put all of this in one place. We identified these 8 essentials, and we wanted to make it a workbook so people can not only read the book and learn about the tools, but apply them. And that's really where you're going to get the results, is in the application. If I don't use what I've learned, it really doesn't benefit me that much. And so it is a book meant to be used. Doug, anything you'd add there?
Well, what I would simply say, that you said it really well, and what I would say, Michael, is, and by the way, I have to congratulate you. I never made it. I was going to be a public accountant, so I dropped out a quarter short of a degree in accounting. So God bless you for finishing. I didn't. I did eventually graduate from college, but not with a degree in accounting. But I would say what Chuck said is pretty much on. So I don't think I have a lot to add there. I did want to comment on your CPA-ness and the value of that, because it's clearly valuable. But we wrote this book because we believe that every human being in the world, and the world has now crossed 8 billion, so we now have more than 8 billion people in the world. We think that everybody in the world influences the people around them. So wherever one lives in the world, unless they live literally by themselves, they are influencing people around them. And with that comes a responsibility. So we take the position that everybody is an influencer, and we label them, therefore, a leader. Leadership is that which one does to influence the behavior of others. All of us are leaders, and we're challenging ourselves as authors and our readers to not wait for someone else to do something about all the stuff that we can look around and see could use some fixing. So, and we're in a point finger world today, and we're saying it's time for reasonable people to say, hey, I'm not going to wait for somebody else to fix it. I'm going to step up and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to make a difference myself. And that's why the book is meant to be a workbook. Anybody should be able to open literally any page of the book. You can go to any page and find something. I just opened it up accidentally, came to page 117, and it says, decision making is a full-time job. If anybody just opened it up and just decided, I'm just going to read about decision making, it's a full-time job, that will be valuable. If they go into the chapter on igniting integrity and responsibility, simple little things like standing up for what's right, basic tools that people can actually use to make a difference in their lives and in the lives of the people they influence, literally immediately. And so that's what we're hoping to accomplish.
I love how you say everyone is a leader. It reminds me when I was working in healthcare, I was running healthcare clinics, and one day, one of the receptionists that I had hired, and I've shared the story about her skill set and when I hired her, because she didn't have any medical experience, but she had customer service experience working for a cell phone company in retail. So I thought, well, you are used to taking abuse, so welcome to healthcare, and you'll get the abuse from the patients and the doctors and everywhere around. So you'll be tough on that. You'll learn the dialogue and the acronyms in healthcare and all of that, but I knew you'd be fine. And one day I heard her say to somebody, I'm just the receptionist, and I pulled her aside quietly. I said, okay, one, you need to remove the just the. You are the quarterback of how this clinic runs. Yes, I'm the executive, fine, but you control the flow of how things are done, from scheduling patients, from coordinating referrals, from making sure that you can advise the patients that, you know, there's a little bit of a wait. That's why they call it the waiting room, by the way. You're gonna wait, appropriately named room for sure. But you navigate and control the rudder on this ship. Yeah, I'm directing, but my hands aren't on the rudder. My team is. And I said, so don't undersell yourself on this. You are critically important to this organization. And she just got big-eyed and, you know, it was all gleaming and stuff because it was a different perspective for her. She thought, well, I'm just a receptionist. Oh, no. You are critically important to this organization. And without you, it would just be nonstop chaos. So reminding people of that they are the leader and giving them hopefully the autonomy to be able to notice things and do something about it instead of waiting for the boss or the boss's boss to give approval on it. It's easier to ask. I heard this a quote from somebody in the Ontario government in Canada, because I used to do work with them as well. And, you know, one of the phrases in when they're working with, you know, healthcare and all that kind of stuff was that it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. And I kind of said that to them. I said, I'd much rather you try something and maybe be wrong than to just stay frozen and not try to fix anything at all. So, you know, I love that you guys talk about that. And that's, you know, kind of the basis of the book. So when compiling this book, and obviously it takes a lot of time, but you obviously utilized all your experiences that you've gained throughout your career and poured it into this workbook. And I like how you frame that too, as a workbook, because I'm with you. You know, I pick up a book and I'm reading it and all of that. If it's a physical book, then yeah, I'm either taking notes, or if it's a book that I'm going to keep and not, you know, resell to somebody or loan to somebody, you know, I don't try to highlight it. But if it's a book I know it's like I'm keeping this book forever, then yeah, it's going to be dog-eared. There's going to be little notes on it and all that kind of stuff. But if it's a digital book, it's the same thing. You can highlight it. But what's important is, okay, you read this thing. What are you going to apply from it? Otherwise, if you don't, then you might as well just stick to fiction, because you're not going to apply anything other than be entertained. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
And that's the point that Doug was making earlier, is you don't have to use all these 8 essentials to see an impact in your life. But if you use something from the book, anything in the book, it will begin to make an impact in your life. And we have this leadership logic chain, which is, if I want to be more effective with other people, it begins with me doing a better job of managing myself. And by the way, managing my own behavior is the only person's behavior I can control is my own. Managing my own behavior involves me making better decisions. And we make about 35,000 decisions a day. Most of them we don't think about. So how I take my coffee in the morning, brushing our teeth, getting dressed, those are all decisions we make every single day that we don't give much thought about. And I don't have to make all 35,000 better, but if I made 1 or 2 better choices a day, you're talking about 4, 5, 600 better decisions a year. And that impact will take your life or your business, your family, your community in a very different direction. Making better decisions is grounded in self-awareness. So it's me paying attention to myself, my behavior. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I doing? Has a big impact on how I influence other people. So it's almost counterintuitive that for me to build a better relationship with you, the person I have to pay the most attention to is me. And the thing about self-awareness is none of us is 100% self-aware 100% of the time. And so we talk about in the book how to improve self-awareness. So knowing my real self involves me paying attention to myself more often. And we talk about an exercise called the freeze. The freeze is, what am I thinking? How am I feeling? What am I doing? And sometimes what I notice is I'm not paying attention. I'm watching TV or I'm reading a book and I read 10 pages. I have no idea what I read. That's me not paying attention to myself. Well, if I notice I'm not paying attention, then the last question is, could I be doing something different? Should I go put the book down and do something else, or should I pay attention to what I'm reading? But that requires the self-awareness to make that decision.
Yeah, so the bottoms up, if you take that logic chain, we go bottoms up. It's self-awareness first, and which is problematic because it's we jokingly say, but it's funny because it's true. People who lack self-awareness, of course, don't know. Because if they knew, then they would be self-aware. So it's very problematic. And so most people overestimate their level of self-awareness. And Chuck said it really well. We read a book, we read a number of pages, and then we go, oh, what did I read? We didn't realize we were reading to ourselves and not paying attention. And so this freeze game is designed to help people make paying attention to themselves a habit. And anybody, by the way, we give freeze reminders. Thousands of them go out every day. They're free. They're just little notes that we go out, a little deal, ping somebody on their email or their text, and it asks them the question: what are you thinking? How are you feeling? What are you doing? Don't judge yourself, just learn to pay attention. What will happen is the process of paying attention to yourself will result in you improving on those 35,000 decisions you make every day. You'll start making a couple of them better. You don't have to make 35,000 better. But if I pay attention to what I'm thinking and what I'm doing, and I keep asking myself, could I be doing something better? You're going to make a couple of better choices. And as a result of that, your life is going to be more fulfilled. And you will experience the joy that comes with that. There's a psychic reward. So this is an intrinsic, extrinsic kind of a experience that one gets to have. So it almost sounds too good to be true. So I want to caution people, it is true, it is simple, and it is hard. True, simple, and hard. Simple and easy are not synonyms. It's hard to develop good habits, but then once they're habits. It then becomes hard to break them. And so that's what we're trying to do, is help people develop good habits to improve their lives so that they in turn can have great relationships with everybody in their lives. So it's self-awareness first, it's decision-making after that. So now that I'm self-aware, I can make some of those decisions better. And when I'm making those decisions better, I'm managing myself better. And when I'm managing myself better, I'm relating to other people better. I'm leading, I'm influencing. Everything is better. So that's the whole chain. And I appreciate, Chuck, that you brought that up. I think that's an important point for our listeners.
Yeah, it's really important, and it reminds me of one of the many things that Jim Rohn said. Things like this. It's easy to do, but it's also easy not to do. And I think that's when people are frozen, not the freeze. And I love that you send out those reminders to people. It's kind of like okay, touch point. Where are you? What's going on? How you feeling? What's your energy level like? What are you doing? What are you focusing on? And I too, I'll be in a book and I'll read 2 or 3 pages and I'm like, okay, what did I just read? And it's like, well, I saw letters and they were connected to each other, but I don't remember anything. Or if I realize if I'm looking at it and all of a sudden it looks like the letters are doing a little bit of a mamba, it's like, okay, it's time to put the book down, because I'm obviously at this particular moment in time not going to retain a thing. So put it down. Go look out at the sky. Don't look at the sun. Hopefully you've been taught that, but if not, don't look at the sun, but at least look in the sky, look at the top of the trees, wherever you happen to be. Even if you're inside, you can't look outside. Focus on something just to kind of get present. And then you can go back to it, or you do something else. That's where your daily to-do list comes in, where you get to check off a couple things, and that in itself is a motivating and discipline factor. It's like, okay, I'm going to work on this. And, like Brian Tracy tells us, like, eat that frog first. It's like, okay, sometimes there are things you want to get done. And I don't want to say 100% of the time, but it's a high percentage for me. If there's something on my to-do list and I'm like, I don't want to do that, I'll wake up the next day and say, I'm doing that and I get it done. And of course, I get it done quicker than I thought it would take because I focused and disciplined myself to get it done. And all of a sudden, you're like, you feel this resilience and energy boost of, wow, that was good. I feel good about that. Okay, what's next? And you want to take on the world. And, it's again, just keeping things in check. But once you start improving your self-awareness, and I love how you guys have said this, a couple better decisions a day. That's, over 700
Mm-hmm.
best or better
Yeah.
decisions.
Right.
Anybody does that, anybody, their life will be improved, guaranteed, if you make better decisions, because that creates opportunity, clarity. I'm a huge fan of clarity because when you have clarity and you can see things, you're going to make better decisions. And from there, it's just going to improve where you work, your life, relationships, everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, Doug and I, in an earlier session today. My life today is a product of the decisions I made yesterday. If I want my life to be different tomorrow, it begins with me making better choices today. And we have what's called a 3-bucket theory. Everything in life falls into one of 3 buckets. Bucket number 1 is what I can control. And there's only one thing in that bucket, and that's my behavior. It's my decision making. Bucket number 2 is what I can influence. And there's only 2 things in that bucket: other people and my health. And bucket number 3 is everything else, all the stuff I have no control over: the weather, traffic, the economy, stock market. Successful people focus on bucket number 1, what they can control, which is their behavior. The more we focus on bucket number 1, the more our influence grows in bucket number 2. And so we're talking about with decision making is a bucket 1 activity. And if I want my life to be different, I can't wait for somebody else to fix it. It's up to me. Like, I got to take some personal responsibility. I have to be honest with myself. One of the 8 essentials we talk about is the connection between integrity and responsibility. Integrity is telling the truth and standing up for what's right. And then responsibility is admitting my mistakes and failures. But integrity and responsibility begin at home. I got to be honest with myself and take responsibility for my own choices and where my life is today. Sometimes that's painful. Sometimes there's parts of my life I don't want to take responsibility for and are harder for me to be honest with. But if I want it to get better, it begins there. Go ahead, Doug. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you mentioned the buckets, and it just reminded me this. I have a picture of this. This is a little girl's version of this. Her dad taught her the 3-bucket theory, and then she came up with this vision of it, and they actually had another artist actually do it. But bucket: in my influence, in my control, no control or influence. And she said, why would you spend any time on that at all? And so here's this little girl, she's like 6 years old. She said, why would you not just disconnect the cord? So if you look at the picture, it's the cord to the no control nor influence is totally disconnected. So here's this little 6-year-old said, why would we spend any time there, Daddy?
That's beautiful. That's why a lot of times when I have, because I work with people on burnout and workplace culture and retention and things like that. And one of the exercises that I have them do, especially when they're doing self-reflection or they're looking within, I tell them, don't judge yourself. Don't beat yourself up. The world does a good enough job for you on that. But approach things with a childlike curiosity. And like, why? Why do we do that? Why is that important? And I love that because bucket 3 is one of those things where if you focus on bucket 1 and you really get fine-tuned in that, bucket 2 is going to improve. The items in bucket 2 are going to improve based on your efforts at bucket 1. Don't even bother with bucket 3. You can't control those things. Michael Hyatt had a quote years and years ago, and I think it was during the Great Recession. And he said, I'm going to make my own economy. I'm not going to worry about the recession. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm not ignoring it, but I'm not going to pay any energy towards that. I'm going to focus on what I can do myself to improve my own personal economy, which then helps my family, helps my community, helps society by me being the best version of me. And if we all did that, can you imagine what this world would look like? It would be so dramatically better for everybody involved.
You just expressed very well why we wrote the book. We're imagining the world could be better. We want to help. And it's so great to be involved with somebody like yourself who obviously wants to do the same thing. So hadn't met you before, but we certainly are in lockstep and agreement on this. This has been great. Thank you for having us.
Well, and to the example that you mentioned, Michael, is imagine if everybody worked on improving their own economy. I mean, just think about that. What that impact would be on the world. It'd be unbelievable. And I think that's really what we're trying to, point people's attention to, is focus on what you can control. And these 8 essentials are things that you can control, and they will have a big impact on your life and those that you care about.
Well, and one of the things you were talking about, Michael, as you were talking about being curious, in our the essential, the chapter on letting go of what you know, it's all about curiosity. See, what happens is a lot of times as we get older, we tend to lock in on what it is we just don't want to know anymore. We just want to say I'm done learning, I got it. I just want everybody to agree with me. Let's stop, but the reality is if we can maintain that childlike curiosity, because what we will discover, the more we learn, the more we will know we don't know. And so we got to let go of what we know so that we have the opportunity to learn what could help us go to the next level. Human nature is such that we are relentless in our effort to progress. The human nature is such that we will always see problem and opportunity in our circumstance. So we cannot stop, luckily, the advancement of humanity. But each of us can contribute to a healthy advancement. And today we need that, especially today, as artificial intelligence rises in its applications. It's real important that human intelligence kind of lead the way. So we need people with the equipment, the 8 essentials, to help them make a positive difference every day.
We interviewed people from all walks of life, Michael, in the book, as I'm sure you've seen, mountain climbers, polar explorers, Olympic coaches, nonprofit leaders. But one of the people we interviewed for the book is a guy named Jeff Stiefler, who used to be the president of American Express. He was also the CEO of a company called Digital Insight. Anyway, one of his sayings is, everybody wants to be in the groove. Nobody wants to be in a rut. And wisdom is knowing the difference. In order for me to be wise, I have to be self-aware, right? I have to be able to examine myself and go, am I in a groove or am I in a rut? Is this taking me to my life where I want it to go? Am I taking responsibility for those choices? That enables me to be wise, but I can't be wise unless I'm self-aware.
It's so important. And I love that quote. It's definitely something that I will, add to my repertoire as well. And in closing, before, I have share where people can find you in the book, when we were talking about artificial intelligence, for some reason, this quote came in mind, and this is an old quote. It's from John Dvorak. He's, a tech writer. I'm assuming he's still writing, because I don't usually read the tech magazines as much as I did when I was younger, but he had a quote when AI was first starting to be bounced around, even, a couple decades ago. He says, yeah, this AI stuff is great, but I'm still holding out for artificial common sense. We're still waiting, John. We're still waiting.
Mark Twain says the only problem with common sense is it's not very common.
Nope, not at all. Not at all. So I've loved this conversation, gentlemen. Where can people find out more about you and this amazing book?
The book itself, you can get anywhere, Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, Porchlight Books. It's available. Our website is think2 Perform, all one word, thinktoperform.com. You can buy it there. You can also go to the website and do our values exercise for free. Get a virtual card deck. You can follow Doug and I on LinkedIn, on X. What else am I missing, Doug?
Yeah, you caught X. I was like, wow, I'm still tweeting, and you're actually you're cutting edge.
You know, the other thing is Doug's going to be giving a speech in Barcelona for the consortium on research for emotional consortium for research on emotional intelligence in organizations on the impact of moral intelligence and emotional intelligence as it compares to AI. You mentioned AI, Michael. And then I've got a TED Talk coming up October 7th in Montreal. So you'll be able to catch some of that, either one of those places, if you don't buy the book.
That's awesome. And I'll definitely have all that in the show notes. So really appreciate both of you. Thank you again so much for your time today. Really appreciate this amazing work, and keep at it. The world needs you too. So thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Our
you,
pleasure,
Michael.
Michael. Thanks for having us.
Welcome back. I've got Erica Ziegelman on the line. Erica, how have you been?
Hi, I've been all right. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Been looking forward to this conversation for quite a bit. So, we interacted on I forget what platform it was, but
Club.
oh, that's right, Lunch Club. That's right, and realized, both have San Diego ties and all of that, but we're not originally from that area. So, why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Yeah. So my name is Erica Ziegelman. I'm an integrative leadership coach and a former media executive, worked in advertising for agencies, startups, tech companies for about 15 years before having my own journey with burnout there and back a couple of times, and then decided to educate myself and acquired a new toolkit of skills. And now I support leaders who are in corporate so that they can tend to themselves and be more conscious leaders and avoid burnout. So we clearly had a lot to geek out on together.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that always comes to mind too, when I think about people that are working in the corporate space that are dealing with burnout and all of that, there's many of us that have left corporate, quote unquote, and went on our own or doing something else, maybe a nonprofit or who knows. But the key thing to remember is we can't have everybody leave corporate because of burnout, because then there won't be any corporate.
Exactly.
So we have to approach this from a different vantage point, with the goal, of course, is to make those important people in every layer of the corporate entities healthy and productive, and actually reaping the benefits of their work and enjoying what they do again. And there's a lot of people that do. And it's not, we don't want to paint this picture where 100% of people are burned out. We're not there yet. And I certainly hope we never do get there. But depending on the industry and depending on the role, the numbers are higher than other areas. And it's alarming because you know what burnout tastes like. I know what it tastes like. It's not fun. I don't like seeing people go through it. I don't want them to go through it. I know you don't either. So it's, that's why it's so important for the work that we're doing, is to show people, there's a way out of this, and you can still, stay in the type of role that you're in right now. Maybe not at that company. Maybe you will stay at that company. Hard to say, but at least you got to have the tools and figure out why you're burning out, what you're doing, what are the external factors that are contributing to it, and sort through it that way, and ultimately hopefully end up being wiser and healthier and just a better employee and a better person after doing all the work.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think with my personal experience and my journey, I had to go through my own personal healing and really acknowledging what was happening. It took someone else to tell me these feelings that you're having and this pure fatigue and exhaustion, all these things are symptoms of burnout. And I didn't even realize. So it was like my own aha moment. And and then my own journey. And then at this time, I was still in corporate, managing client services function at a very large tech company. And I realized I had an opportunity from within to shift how I was showing up and to give permission and model for my team, how to work and take care of myself in a different way that was more sustainable. And I started to notice the ripple effect of that. And ultimately, I decided to remove myself from the corporate environment, but I reach back in now from, with an outside perspective to help educate and uplift and transform those leaders so that they can have a ripple effect. And that's really where I see the impact. When we start with the leaders, they are modeling it for the generations, the rising leaders that will follow them. And we can have that be a toxic model, or we can have it be a healthy, sustainable model. We just need to teach them and guide them how.
And that's the key thing, is just teaching them, because the way that they learned was probably a combination of the leaders or executives that they've worked with in the past, and they kind of borrowed some habits, some good, some maybe not so good, and that's just how they do it. And they can't approach things in a different way. And having somebody like yourself that has obviously the corporate background, they'll listen to you because you've been in the trenches. You know what it's like, and you can say, yeah, there's this and this, and here's a different way to approach it. And if you do this, then you will get better performance out of yourself, and you'll get better performance out of your team because they're mimicking you. And that's the thing that a lot of executives don't really notice, is that their team is behaving the way that their executive is. So if they're working 18-hour days, sending emails, 11 p.m. on a Saturday night and doing all this work, your employees are thinking, well, that's what's expected of me. And many executives would say, if you ask them, do you expect your employees to work at Saturday night, 11 o'clock on a non-urgent matter? And they'd say, no. So, well, you're sending them emails, and they think that you need to respond that. Now, they're out, they might be at the club or out to dinner or a concert or something like that. And all of a sudden they get this Slack message of, need to update this presentation. And all of a sudden, that's the only thing that's on that employee's mind right now. It can be completely removed from wherever they're at. And it's like, I always tell people, it's like, as hard as it is, like, just put your phone on do not disturb, or I know it does have an off button. I found that on my iBinky not too long ago. I'm like, this thing turns off? Wow, I didn't know that. I knew it'd die if it ran out of battery, but you could actually choose to shut this thing off. Wow. That must have been a new feature. I don't remember that before, but I'm kidding. But most people won't.
Exactly. And the percentage of time, depends on the industry and the field that you're in. If you're in healthcare, this might be very different than you work in media, but it's very rarely a true emergency, right? A true business emergency that needs to be attended to in that minute. But like you said, it hijacks your attention. So even if there's nothing you can do about it, or it's not necessary for you to take an action, you're now taken out of the present moment and having a parallel experience to what you're actually doing, and which also means that we don't have that time to recover. So I think staying in that constant state of vigilance and like always waiting for that next Slack to come in or email to come in, or urgent request from your boss or your client, like keeps us in this elevated, activated state with adrenaline and cortisol constantly running. And then when you have time off, you can't really unplug. We're like addicted to that. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but that's what happens. And if leaders aren't aware that they're contributing to that, that's a huge opportunity to inform them and to shift these behaviors from the top down.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of that. I called it, I actually published an article not too long ago on my blog about addiction to email, basically. And what I purposely did, not with your email, but with most of the emails that I get, I set up a separate email account. If it's a newsletter or it's a lead magnet or something like that. So I have everything driven to that email address. So that way it kind of keeps my business email account relatively clean, other than just business inquiries and, client work and things like that. So the other day I went to log in at the other email, and there were 60 new emails that came in that morning. And I thought, okay, this is way too much. It's like, and I'm not saying that those I signed up for them. They weren't just like spam, they showed up. No, these are separate emails that I had signed up for with all great content. But the problem is, if you spend all your time looking at those 60 emails and all the messages, and again, all of them were rock solid good, it takes you away from what you should be working on. Pick 2 or 3 things that are your most important things to do that's going to move your business, your career, whatever, forward. If it meets the criteria of those 3, then by all means, sign up for it, read the email, but apply it. Do something with it. Make a note of it or apply it. Otherwise, you're basically reading the newspaper. And it's, again, not knocking anybody that has, sent out emails too, but what I ended up doing is like, you know what, this is too distracting to me. So I had a choice, either delete the email account or just unsubscribe. And I went through and just unsubscribed pretty much all of them. And if anybody's listening and I'm, you got my unsubscribe, it's nothing personal. It's just it was taking too much time away. So now my inbox, it's a lot, a lot less emails are coming in. It's business specific mostly and all of that. So I'm finding that, thing you just talked about. It's like, wait a minute, I didn't get a message. Oh, gotta go check my message. Gotta go check my. So it's something that I found myself guilty of, and I talk about it too. It's like, come on, my brother gave me the phone nickname of iBinky because I was always on it like a baby with a pacifier.
Yeah.
I'm sure Apple has that trademarked. If they don't, they should. Or somebody else can do it and then, make a few $1 million off of Apple. They
get royalties. Yeah.
They have it. But they would probably win in court because it's so close, and Apple has more legal power than most of us do if we all combine our money together. But another story for another day. But ultimately, it just boils down to, having boundaries around when you consume things and when you don't. And everybody's different when it comes to that. And I'm not about to say you should only check your emails at this, and this time. No, everybody's different. But I think we're both in agreement on, and we talked about this a little bit in the pre-show, where you have to really have boundaries around what kind of information you're consuming and how much of it, especially during times like we face right now with what's going on in the world and with the situation in the Ukraine, and of course, the recent developments and in Israel, in the Middle East, and all the players, and we are in a very combustive state right now, in my opinion, and I'm very, very concerned about what could come of all of this, because it's one rocket or one bomb away from a full-blown across the planet kind of thing. And I don't want to even use the words, but there's been 2 of them in our history, and it wouldn't shock me to see a 3rd one. I just certainly hope I don't see it in my lifetime or for generations or quite frankly ever. But it's a very frightening situation that we're facing in a lot of pockets of this world. And we talked about it again in the pre-show on how heavy it is for us and for people around the globe, and and even all sides of it. I'm not going to isolate one group versus another. It's heavy for everybody, and I really just it's hard on us, and it's hard on everybody, and I really wish it wasn't that way, because it doesn't need to be that way, but it is. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, even as you're just shifted to that topic, I noticed my heart rate increase, because it is such an activating time that we're in. And there are so many global events and so many things that are overstimulating, that, whether it's visuals of horrific violence or climate disaster, like all of these things that like we're seeing happen in real time. And we talked about this in the pre-show too. I think the difference now is that with social media and just being globally connected, we see everything happening in real time. And it's so much for our systems to take in. And when we're already carrying chronic stress from our work and from our family obligations and financial stress and all of these things just piled on, it's so imperative that we are defining our own boundaries with how much we're willing to take in, and then how we are proactively giving ourselves space to rest and recover. And really, like let us down regulate our nervous system response, because staying in this constantly activated state is a surefire, like fast track to burnout. And so I'm, noticing for myself what those boundaries need to be. And I was talking about just taking social media off my phone, because the thing with social media is I might go because I want to like soothe myself with like a kitten video, but you don't get to choose what you're served. So you might see something that you do not want to see, and you're kind of bombarded by that image. And before you even have a chance to scroll past it, like it's too late. You've already seen it and you can't unsee it. So yeah, I think this is a really important time for us to be turning inward and regulating, for ourselves, but also co-regulating with the people around us, with our animals, with pets. That's another great way to calm the nervous system, but just like finding those tools and practices that help us stay grounded when we're constantly being reactivated.
Yeah, and you make a great point, compared to, previous times of war and strife where, the information would come to us through news channels, cable news or broadcast news and whatnot. And you, of course, working in the media, you're well aware of this. There's a review of what we can put on the air and what we can't. And sometimes they'll say, there's a warning, this is pretty graphic, but there's certain things that they will not put on. The thing with TikTok or Instagram or any other service where you can actually go live and show exactly what's going on in the world, not just from, your balcony in Tel Aviv and seeing things, bombs and all of that, but even the people that are taking hostages and some of the things that we've been, I thankfully have somehow avoided seeing most of that, because I just, but you hit it right on the head. You launch Instagram, you want to see some cat videos or the memes of the cat driving, leaving work. One of my favorites was, can't find a parking spot at work, I'm going home, they have enough people. I just found that so hysterically funny, and just this white cat driving a car. It's comical, and we need that type of silly humor in these really heavy times. But unfortunately, you launch it, it's kind of like a social media roulette. You're like, what am I going to get here? And it could be something, again, depending on who you follow, and it gets to the point where it's like, okay, do I unfollow everything? But you have to understand, the algorithms on these things, they will feed you content that you may have liked or looked at before. So even though you may not be following, let's say, a news agency, it's like, you've liked something from a similar organization before. Would you like to see this? And you're like, no, I don't want to see that right now. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that from the social media standpoint. I am not one for censorship. But there has to be some humanity, and we're not going to show graphic things that are going to be harming to the psyche of people that could consume it. I mean, you could traumatize somebody.
That's what it is. It's vicarious traumatization, where we are being traumatized by seeing these visuals and hearing stories, especially when it's like, I'm considering it almost like non-consensual when it happens in social media. And I realize it's my choice to open an app, but yeah, we can be traumatized. We are being traumatized by seeing this and hearing the sounds and the stories. And, you know, I'm not advocating for putting our heads in the sand either and not being informed, because I think it's really important to be educated and to understand the situations that are happening. Just from a political perspective, we are like all connected, a humanitarian perspective more than anything, but to do it in a way where like it's at a time where we choose, where we feel resourced to do it, where it's not, you know, going to just like take you out of your day when it's just a lot. It's been very, to me, it's been very kind of all consuming this week. So trying to figure this, you know, how to walk this line for myself.
Yeah, and it's one size doesn't fit all.
Right.
It's what I do myself when times are challenging or down, or you know, dealing with a bit of depression or anxiety or anything like that, is it just like, okay, let's get back to the basics, you know, okay, let's, you know, whatever kind of brings you more of a relaxed or happy state. Could be meditation, could be listening to just, you know, different sounds, brown noise, your favorite music, you know, going for a drive and going back to your favorite coffee shop that is nearby. You know, if you live across country, that's going to be a long drive, but you can find something local. Apparently there's coffee and tea shops in San Diego. I've heard a rumor. I don't bother with the frequent cards, because I'd have to have like 2 wallets just for all of those things. So it's just not, it's like, that's okay. I'll let somebody else get a discount. But whatever you do, and this goes for obviously for you and everybody listening and watching, is just, you know, figure out what those things are in life that you love doing, that kind of brings you into a, I guess, a singular space where you're not thinking about work. You're not thinking about what's going on, you know, overseas or in your own backyard or whatever. Just, you know, get to, you know, find that whatever it is. And sometimes it could be a physical object that you touch to remind yourself, okay, it's going to be okay. Right? I mean, right now we're in the midst of a storm, you know, as you know, I forgot who said it. It was, I think Churchill, if you're going through hell, keep going. You know, a lot of people have said that, you know, don't stop, just keep going, you know, through it, get through the storm and you'll be fine. You know, in situations like what we're seeing right now, there's so many of us that feel powerless, but I think I want to flip the switch on that and saying, if you take care of yourself and you protect your energy and you protect your well-being and you get to a happy, loving state of yourself, making sure that you truly love yourself and you're taking care of yourself the best that you can, that emits an energy that people recognize, and hopefully they will pick up on it and they will do the same thing. So we can get to more of a harmonious state, because we are one, you know, one planet. Yes, there's these borders that were man-made, and a variety of other factors involved. I don't want to simplify things. It's complex, you know, especially, you know, since, you know, some of these battles and things like that have been going on for a very, very long time. And it's to the point where I often say, do they even remember what they're fighting about? It's, you know, again, that's a simplification of the dynamics of everything that's going on over in Israel and Palestine, the Gaza Strip, and all of that. But it shouldn't require harming people. It should. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out, because come on, people shouldn't be dying about this, but they are. And you know, it's tough. But again, going back to, you know, what we talked about originally, these type of things, you know, can cause prolonged stress, which prolonged stress turns into burnout. So you have to be really careful about this. And I love what you said. Don't put your head in the sand, but you have to have some regulation and some boundaries around what you consume and how much you consume. You know, I think back to my parents, you know, my dad passed a few years ago, but they'd put on the news, at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and that thing would run until 7 o'clock. So they were constantly getting gaslit with all the negativity that's going on in the world. Didn't matter which flavor of the news they were watching. It's got, unfortunately, there's a lot of negative things that the news agencies highlight because that's what gets ratings, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fear. Yeah. It's a lot of fear. And I mean, rightly justified right now, but I wanted to just go back to something that you said about like finding those resourcing activities, meditation or being out in nature or taking a walk or talking to a friend. I think it's really important that we identify where these sources of safety are that really calm our systems, that help us come back to a sense of connection to ourselves, but also, I think most importantly, to other people. It's really important that we're checking in with each other, with our friends, our family, our loved ones, our colleagues, because everyone's experiencing this time in a different way, but it's pretty hard to not be affected by it. And so I think, just being really mindful of like, we're having our own personal experiences, but the people around us are as well. And so we have an opportunity to, as we've been talking about, like set an example of how to stay connected and how to stay present and how to take care of ourselves and each other. And that can look differently for everyone, but it's really whatever makes you feel safe and calm and connected, I would say, are like really the three main things.
And that applies to working in corporate as well.
Yes.
Yeah. We talked about a lot of, real life, real heavy stuff here, but it's kind of going back to what I said a moment ago. It's like sometimes you just go back to the basics, start at okay, let's start clean slate. Don't throw everything out, but just like, okay, we're gonna go in a different room that isn't used. Okay, let's kind of map this out. Let's start here and add the things we need to. It's kind of like the junk drawer in a way. And it's probably not a great analogy, but we all have those, where there's a box or a drawer that's just filled with, I'll save this for later kind of thing. And you look at it and it's just like, what in the world? I don't even know what this thing is. Yeah. But eventually it's good to kind of clear that out, start with a fresh slate, and you find things, I've been looking for that, or I don't need that anymore. And then a week later you realize, oh yeah, you did. But you can order it online anymore. Life is easier now when it comes to things like that. Yeah, well, they'll sell you that little handle for your bread maker. What's that? We don't need this. Oops. Yeah, guess we can't make bread now. But at the end of the day, it's just a reminder for all of us we have to take care of ourselves before we can take care of anybody else. And when we do that, and we find, and it takes time, because especially when, and this, when people are burned out, they've kind of forgotten how to take care of themselves. And getting back to the basics of like, okay, what does taking care of yourself look like? Describe that and give them the permission to do that again. Let's just start one little step at a time. And when you do that, and it becomes a habit, and it's, it sticks around, then you start seeing other areas of your life improve. And then from there, all of a sudden you're like, wow, you know what? Yeah, the stress from work is still there, but it's not impacting me the same way anymore. And I'm clearer now on what I need to do and what I don't. And it turns around leaders, which turns around teams, which turns around groups and companies. And it's so simple to do, but it's really hard for people to do. And I think that's where we come in and we say, look, you can do this. You just got to approach it, a little bit differently than you have in the past. And you'll see big returns just by getting real crystal clear on what you want to do and what you don't.
Exactly. So well said. I think, I've found that often the people who experience burnout are the ones who consider themselves to be helpers and to have really big hearts and to want to make sure that everyone else is taken care of, right? So as a leader, you put your team first, you put the business first, you put your clients first, and then you put your family and your friends first. And but before you know it, we have finite time, energy, and resources, and we ourselves are at the bottom of the list, and then we run out of juice to serve anybody else. So yeah, this isn't about like us doing anything wrong, but it's about turning some of that love and care and tending towards ourselves first, so that we can then continue to serve, right? To do it in a sustainable way, and continue to take care of our people.
Yeah, identify as a reformed people pleaser.
Yeah, same.
There's a book, you're probably familiar with it. If not, definitely pick it up. It's called Disease to Please. It was by Harriet Breaker. It came out in 2000, I believe. And every couple years, it's my holiday present to myself to read that book again. It's got 21 days of exercises in it. It identifies all types of people pleasing. I thought I was a certain type of people pleaser, but after reading the book, I realized I was something else. And it was an aha moment for me when I finished that book, and it alarmed me and it also gave me insights as to why, one of the components why I burned out, because I was putting everybody else before me. I was like, I wouldn't delegate because they got too much work to do. I'll just go ahead and do it. And yeah. So if you don't take care of yourself first, you're not going to take care of anybody. So, and when you do take care of people, they're getting a much better version of you. And that's one of those hurdles that a lot of people have to get over. Once they figure that out, they go, wow, I'm actually the best I can be. So I can be the best when I do give. So it's
that's the thing. It's also modeling how to take care of ourselves. Like when, we sometimes we think, oh, I need to demonstrate to my team how to work hard and how to deliver results. And of course that's important, but there's one of the most impactful things that I saw an old manager of mine do, and this was probably 12 years into my career, and was the first time I saw a manager take all of her paid time off during the year. Didn't roll over days. She used all of her time. She went to every one of her kids' recitals and school conferences, and she showed up for her personal life in a way I had never seen modeled before. And then it gave me permission to use my paid time off, and to recharge. That's why we have it. But I hadn't seen it before, because I had only had the example of managers who are like, oh, I work through my vacations and I only take 2 weekends off a year. And like, there was some badge of honor in that. And I had to see it modeled in my own leader to realize like, oh, wow, that empowers me to do the same. And when I do it, it empowers my team to do the same. And this is how we prevent burnout. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had that badge of honor. Then it was turned into a badge of stents in my left anterior descending artery. So I don't want to do that again. That was not fun. But at the end of the day, it's important for us to take care of ourselves, because when we do that, we're actually taking care of others as well. So, Erica, I've loved this conversation. We could talk for hours, you know that. But where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Yeah. Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram once I go back on there. I am on LinkedIn regularly at Erica Ziegelman, or my website, ericaziegelman.com. I would love to connect with any listeners or viewers of the show. I offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching, and work with corporate teams on conscious leadership, burnout prevention, all the topics we talked about. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure, and love, being able to share our experience and empower others with this knowledge.
No, thank you. And I'll definitely all that information in the show notes. So Erica, always good to talk with you. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Welcome back. I've got John Rossman on the line. John, how are you?
Doing great, Michael. Nice to see you.
Likewise. You've got a really creative and interesting career. So for those that aren't aware of your background, why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into this conversation.
Yeah, so my John Rossman, and I'm an author. I've written 3 books and have a 4th one coming out early next year. But I'm really a problem solver. I'm a strategist, and I work with my clients on kind of solving the really hard problems in their business, like how do we compete? How do we create distinctive value propositions? I was an early Amazon executive and got to launch the marketplace business at Amazon, and that story has impacted me in so many ways, and that was really the basis of kind of my books and all the work that I get to do.
Yeah, that was a pretty big deal, you know, from just starting off and selling books, and then all of a sudden the marketplace now everybody has those boxes in their houses because, well, they've ordered so much. And of course, we all know what happened during the pandemic as well. But it's been an organization that has done extremely well. So, what were those early days like? I just
well, they weren't the successes that you were referencing, and I think that's what people forget. So I was at Amazon early 2002 through 2005, so 4 years. I got to launch the marketplace business. So that's the business third-party selling at Amazon.com, and that's almost 60% of all units shipped and sold today. When I was there, it was a very frugal, very scrappy, very doubted organization. We were always called Amazon.con and Amazon.toast in the press and everything. But the organization just always stuck to its principles and its perspective on how to reinvent core customer experiences and operations experiences, and how investing in the future was always kind of the mission of the organization. And so while it was much different than it is today, the principles on how we held each other accountable, how we made decisions, how we prioritize, those were the principles that led into the Amazon leadership principles. And that's kind of one of the stories that I captured in a book called The Amazon Way.
Yeah, and it was, I remember those early days too, because I was in the IT industry at that point, and they're saying, "Will Amazon ever turn a profit?" And I remember those comments, and Bezos was on television like, yeah, we've got this, we're doing this and doing this, and of course, you and the team in the backdrop are like, yeah, okay, let's be the best we can at all of this, and you laid the foundation and the infrastructure that helped create what it is now. Because if you guys didn't do that work back then, there would be no Amazon at this point, I would guess, because there's only so much water you can take in the boat, and it's a situation where your team stuck through it, and those principal lessons, I'm guessing you've used those throughout your career and all the consulting you've done and the work that you're doing at your own organization.
Yeah, I mean, that really is the playbook. So I left Amazon late 2005 and started working with my clients on innovation and digital transformation and operational improvement and strategy. And it was 5 years after I left Amazon that one of my clients at the Gates Foundation came to me with kind of the observation you were making, which is like, oh, you take the little anecdotes and strategies from Amazon and delicately insert them into our business. And he goes, I think you ought to write a book about that. And I'd never thought about that before. And I listened, and I was like, oh, interesting. So I talked him into being my partner on these books. I still work with Greg, and it's been so much fun and so impactful. These principles and my story and my work, it's not about Amazon. It's about you and what you can learn from a company like Amazon to help both operate a better business for today, but also, create the path and the innovation to creating a durable business that is competitive in the future. One of the things people forget about all these stories of Amazon was that, even the marketplace business, that was the third attempt. In 2002, that was the third attempt at some type of third-party selling approach at Amazon. And there was all these naysayers, especially internal advisors and the board and leaders who are like, I don't think we're ever going to beat eBay at this game. And I just don't think this is the way for us to go. But Jeff was, he always said, be committed to your strategy, flexible on your tactics. And so he realized like, hey, we have to keep innovating on this. And that fundamental lesson of understanding that true innovation always starts from a point of failure. You don't start with success. And then, most of our projects, though, we expect immediate success. And that's the way most well understood proposals and projects should work. Innovation is experimentation, and experimentation is based on, going from failure and iterating your way to success. So the key to that is, how do you do it in as cheap and fast and efficient approach as possible so that you can afford those iterations? And that's really the core work that I do with my clients and advise executives on kind of both their individual role in that, as well as the processes and the approaches that need to go into organizations. And the thing I'm completely committed, I know this for a fact, which is mid-sized companies have more opportunity to innovate and compete than big companies. And everybody likes to have their excuse. Either it's the industry or the size of company. It's like, those are excuses. Everybody can innovate. And it really is just figuring out what your playbook is. And that's what I work with my clients on, is building their playbook and their leadership model for how they innovate.
That's so important. And I'm glad you said that about the mid-sized companies, because all the big companies didn't used to be big companies. They were all really small. And I'm often reminded of the fail fast type of mentality. It's like, when you're trying something, you're doing something, innovating, experimenting, things like that, find those failures, because then that way you're just narrowing down to the point where you'll find the right formula or ingredients or the right setup or the right components to a marketplace to be able to take on and blow past eBay and everybody else, for that matter, where people just naturally gravitate and go, and it's almost like it's a verb, to the point. And that's when you have an organization and you're becoming, from a noun to a verb, that says a lot. And again, I keep going back, and I'm a big infrastructure guy. I love foundation. I love it because if you get that right, then it allows you to be agile as you're trying different things and going down the road. And, a thing that come to mind too is, it's a lot easier to change and adjust things when you're in motion than it is just sitting at a table going, well, what about this? What about this? It's like doing helps you discover, okay, well, that's not going to work. Okay, let's see what does. 3M with Post-it notes, that glue that they couldn't figure out what they were going to do with. Well, how many bazillion Post-it notes have they sold because of this glue that wasn't really sticking to anything? And like, what do we do with this? Oh, let's make these little notes. And well, every office has them. So it's just, that's, one of those things where, like, those side effects sometimes can create other opportunities as well.
Yeah. Where, everybody philosophically, they'll kind of agree with everything you just said, and it's true. But then it's like, well, how do we do that? Right. And that's where I try to really fill in with some mechanisms. One of the underlying secrets from Amazon is this approach of writing. And so by writing out in narratives, in a term called a future press release, and FAQs, frequently asked questions, and debating those, like, we have a concept, forcing yourself to write those things out and then debate them. That's the cheapest and best way to experiment. So that's how we afford experiments, is by being disciplined enough to actually write them out. PowerPoint or just talking about things is not refined enough for the subtle differences of, what your new product, what your new service, what your new improvement might be. And so if you can pick up these habits of writing out these concepts, it's an absolute superpower, and it scales. You can do it as an individual. I do it in my own business. You can do it as a team. You can do it as an enterprise. You can do it just part of the time. But that's the type of mechanism that helps reinforce the important concepts you're talking about, of like, hey, we need to iterate. We need to try new things. They aren't going to work. Yes. And here's how we can actually go about doing that in a fast, affordable, repetitive manner that improves not just the idea, but how we approach those ideas.
And the how is where the fun stuff happens, because you can kind of get the foundation and, like you said, the philosophical ways of doing things, but it's that action and implementation. Okay, what tools do we need to do this. And, with your background and all the experiences that you've had over your career so far, there's so many things you can pull from. And, what I tell people in the work that I do in consulting and burnout prevention and all of that stuff, there's things that I bring to the table. Could have been from my accounting degree, could have been from IT,
Right.
could have been from healthcare, it could have been for nonprofit, it could be in speaking. It just, they're just there. I don't think, okay, I'm going to use that tool that I picked up in 1993 when I was working for that CPF. I don't remember where I picked it up, but it's something that's just there. And it with the expertise based on all the ingredients that you're exposed to when you're working with a customer or a client and figuring out, okay, how do they break through this particular barrier that they're stuck on? And it could be something major that's involving all kinds of different things, or it could be something as simple as they've grown and now they want to get to that next level, but they're not sure how to do it. And, that's where your expertise really comes through.
Well, I think that's, how advisors really add to their clients is by bringing a different perspective. And, you're the client 90% of the time is always the expert in their field, in their market. Well, you add value by bringing something different to it, right?
Exactly. And, helps when you have either a finance background or a systems background or a strategy background, because again, when you work with different industries, I know most industries say we're so different than everybody else. And, the spoiler it is not really. I mean, there's different things, but everybody's got a widget. It's just, what is that widget? But obviously there's different things that pop up.
And there's always exemplars within that industry who have fought through those things and everything, right? Like I do some business with some automotive organizations, and they still today resist change, like, oh, it's the automotive industry, it's highly regulated, it's highly complex, and it truly is. But yet the benefit of having Tesla there is like, but it can be done. Yeah. And so it really oftentimes takes one to demonstrate like everything you say is true, yet we can still fundamentally either reinvent the customer experience, create a different business model, radically improve operations. With those three things, that's what innovation is. And it's those that respect those industry, traditions and regulations and deeply understand them, but can still find a way to improve customer experiences, improve business models, and improve operations. Those are going to be the winners.
Yeah, I grew up in Detroit, so I know all about the auto sector and their, let me use the right word here. I don't want to say rigid. I really want to say rigid, but I'm not going to say rigid. Very traditional in a lot of their things. And, Tesla came in and basically did a reinvention of the car. And the others are now catching up, and, we'll see how market share and all that plays out down the road. But, it kind of goes back in an ironic kind of way back to when Henry Ford was getting ready to roll out the first cars, and everybody just said, no, we want a faster horse. We don't need this buggy that's motorized. Why do we need that? And well, obviously it demonstrated a lot that we needed in order to do what we do today. It's in a world without cars would be kind of weird, but we may see that. It might be see something else. It's just evolving, but again, understanding the tradition, but also tapping into the future. And what will our future look like? Well, start planting the seeds today so your future will look like the way you want it to look.
Absolutely.
So in your book that's coming up in a few months, tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap it up from there and have people find out where you can get it and all that good stuff. But what's the book?
Super. And I've got what's hopefully a compelling offer to the listener. So the name of the book is Big Bet Leadership, Your Transformation Playbook for Winning in the Hyper Digital Era. And everybody knows that, digital transformations, most strategies, most innovation programs, they have 85% or higher failure. Well, why? Right? And what do you do about it? So this book attacks the specific failure points of big bets and gives an anecdote or a technique in order to help solve for or avoid it without having to put in a whole new methodology or things like that. And I have a co-author. My co-author, Kevin McCaffrey, was my client at T-Mobile. We stood up a new business incubation practice there. We took many of the concepts from the Amazon way and Think Like Amazon, and we broadened them out and incorporated them into an organization that didn't come from that heritage. And then a bunch of other tricks to really help give a practical set of techniques to executives to help win at these major transformations. A big bet is any concept or strategy or plan that we think has the potential for really changing the trajectory of the business, but we know inherently has material risks. And our goal with the book is to help mid-sized companies be able to win at these big bets without having to hire a major management consulting and to be able to afford to do this, which is a firm belief of mine, is that most innovation is going to come from mid-market companies, and they need great advisors and great tools in order to help them do this well. And that's the goal. So if you go to bigbetleadership.com, there's a form there. Fill it in, tell me what podcast you heard this on, your Kindle email address, and when the book releases on February 27th, 2024, I'll do a drawing from this podcast, send 10 or 15 copies to listeners of the Kindle book. My only request, and it's a request, is that they write a customer review for a book. It's really vital for books. And so that's my request. It's not an obligation, but go to bigbetleadership.com, register for the book, and I'll send you a Kindle copy of it when it releases February 27th.
It's awesome. And I can't wait to see this book because, again, I am a firm believer of businesses of that size are the ones that do so much innovation. They help out communities. They employ so many people and can really, change things for the better in whatever they're making, whether it's a product or a service. It just improves humanity when these companies survive and thrive. And this book is going to help them do that, especially in these ever-changing times with automation, technology, AI, you name it. There's so much going on. And so a lot of these businesses are just spinning their heads trying to figure out, what do I do? What do I do? So this book is going to provide an amazing roadmap for that. So I really appreciate you offering that, John. So where can people find out about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Yeah, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn, John Rossman, or rossmanpartners.com is my business website. I do keynote speaking, I do workshops, I do coaching and advisory, got a great team, and you can engage with us kind of everywhere from buying a book through, engagements and everything. And my goal is to really help senior leaders understand how to drive systematic change within their organizations.
That'll be awesome. I'll definitely have all that in the show notes. So, John, thank you again for your time today. Really appreciate you, and congratulations again on all the books and the new one coming out.
Well, thanks for inviting me to be a guest on your show, and thanks to your audience for listening.
Thank you. Welcome back. I've got John Ostenson on the line. John, how are you?
Hey, Michael, doing great. Yourself?
I'm doing really, really well. Really been looking forward to this conversation for a bit, and because the work you do is pretty intriguing. I think pretty much all the listeners, but those that have that entrepreneurial itch are really going to find some value out of this. So why don't you share a little bit about you and the work you do, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Yeah, well, to kick it back, like so many of your listeners, spent many years in the corporate world and had a good run, but wanted to do something a little more entrepreneurial. I had that desire to step out and build my own empire instead of just someone else's. And so about 8 years ago, I had the opportunity and really stumbled into franchising. Stepped in as president of Shelf Genie, which is a large franchise system all across North America, and ran the day-to-day operations, supporting all of our owners across North America. And for me, that was the light bulb moment to this model of franchising, where so many people with different backgrounds could step into a new industry for them, take some transferable skill sets with them, and be successful in building their own business. So really fell in love with it. Ended up partnering with the founder. We spun off. We've been invested in franchises ourselves on the franchisee side. So I've been and am currently on both sides of the table, but I've got good people running those businesses, and allows me now to spend probably 95% of my time helping other entrepreneurs and investors or wannabe-preneurs, right, get involved in business ownership through franchising. So love getting out there, educating. It's entirely free to work with us. We work with over 600 franchise brands and really helping individuals figure out what are those top opportunities that are available in their market that could be the right fit.
I love the work because so many people that want to be entrepreneurs are, trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? What do I launch? But if there's existing businesses that already exist, so pretty much the framework, here's the business. I don't want to call it business in a box. That demeans a lot of work that goes into it, but something like, here's something, it's a template that's easy to go, and there's so many different businesses that are in the franchise world that you can be a franchisee for. You just pick the ones that aren't heavily saturated in your area, and you jump into it, launch it if you've got business sense. And most people that want to do this have at least some initial sense. And I think that's when, working with your team and all that, just kind of, roundabout way vet them and go, okay, is this right for you? Because it's not right for everybody. But as we talked in the pre-show a little bit, you don't have to be as heavily involved as you would think, because there's a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to be spending 800 hours a day at the place and all of that. And maybe in the beginning you might, but it depends on what you're launching. But just thinking about the different organizations that are franchises, I can walk out my door and probably come across 300 of them in a 10-minute walk. They're everywhere.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on a couple of great points there. Franchising is not right for everyone. Some people are too entrepreneurial and want to put their thumbprints all over the business, but others say, hey, I love that. And I would humbly say, I believe it is the better path for most people into business ownership, at least that first go round, because you've got a franchisor on the sidelines that's coaching you. You've got other franchisees across the nation that are living the same thing day in, day out. So you're exchanging best practices, learning from each other. You've got a playbook. That the product market fit is there because it's been successful in other markets. So it's all about going out and executing against that. Maybe you're getting supply chain benefits on the services side or the product side, buying in bulk. You get your marketing somewhat optimized early on because, again, they've launched the same business in other markets. So when they're running the marketing for you, there's just a lot of benefits. Even when you go to exit, oftentimes you get a higher multiple on that sale than you would otherwise. So, I call it a trifecta of business ownership, but you're building a business that, is going to have cash flow. If you run it halfway decent, it's going to provide an exit value down the road. So you're building an asset. And then third, you get tax benefits that oftentimes people forget about. They compare their W-2 salary with, with business ownership. And, it takes work in the early days. You may not be making a ton of money, but you're also able to write off a ton of expenses. So from a net standpoint, there's some benefits there. And I've got all sorts of creative tax strategies around that. But, you also hit on the industry side. I wrote a book called Non-Food Franchising, which I'm happy to share with all of your listeners. We'll pass out a free copy. We'll talk more about it later. But, I've got nothing against the food guys. We need them. We support them. But my humble belief is there are easier ways to make money in business ownership and through franchising in all these other industries that oftentimes people don't think about.
Yeah, it's critical. There's, everybody kind of thinks franchise. I think they just naturally gravitate to, fast food restaurants and restaurant chains and all of that. And it's like, yeah, they're there. A good buddy of mine, his parents ran a construction company. They might still do. I think they're retired now, but I don't. They may still own the business. I'm not sure. I haven't talked to them about it lately. But they basically were contracted with one of the major fast food restaurants. I won't mention a name because they don't sponsor my show, but I'll give you a hint. Their logo is gold and it looks like an M. So I'll let you do deductive reasoning on that. But they were contracted to build locations in the Chicagoland area. So they had the system down. They had the template from McDonald's, on how to build them. And they would literally have a plot of land, and next thing you know, boom, here's a McDonald's, as I just spoiled the name. Here's the McDonald's, right, within weeks, which is great for a franchisee to be able to have something launched so quickly. Because as a business owner, when you launch a business, it takes time. It's not for majority of people, it's not an overnight thing. But here's something where it's something that's well established. And I think one of the big things too is name recognition. Okay, my organization, I launched it back in 2016. It took time to grab some attention and all of that, and now it's doing good. But if you're a franchisee and you open up a well-known name brand, people already know somewhat what you're about before you even open the doors, and that is a huge, huge advantage for people that are just starting a business.
Yeah, and I would say oftentimes people think the brand is a big benefit, like you're saying. I would say if you're in food, if you're in hotels, two areas that we don't focus as much energy on, then brand is extremely important. What's interesting is some of the categories that our clients are getting involved in, things like home and property services. Think about insulation. Insulation is a $52 billion a year business in the US. Most people I talk to can't name a company within the insulation space. So I'd say brand in that case is probably less important. And some of these other attributes, what kind of support system are you getting? What's the technology stack? How do you differentiate in your lead generation from other clients? But I'll just kind of piggyback on that thought. Some of the things that people are getting into, and we're seeing more interest than we've ever seen before, it's categories like home and property services, non-sexy, cash flowing, understandable businesses that aren't trendy. They're not going out of style anytime. So it's things like insulation, gutters, flooring, dumpsters. But then people also have an interest in health and wellness. Everything from mental health to men's health to maybe a little bit of fitness. It's categories that people will always spend on regardless of the economy, somewhat recession resilient. So think about kids, pets, seniors. You're always going to spend on those categories, right? The things you care about. So I'd say that's the general theme that we're seeing out there right now. But with record levels of cash on the sideline, a lot of real estate investors are also coming our direction because they're saying, hey, there aren't that many good real estate deals to be had, scarcity of inventory and such. And so they're jumping into franchising because it's another, tax advantaged alternative investment within their portfolios, how they see it.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do, is diversify. And we don't give investment advice on this show, but diversification, I will give you that. That goes a long way. And you had mentioned pets, and a conversation I had last year with an organization that was starting up, and they were starting to branch out a little bit, and probably will be looking at some type of a franchisee type of model, I would guess, down the road. But they were home-based pet care services. So literally, they come up in a Sprinter van, and they can help take care of your dog or cat or other pet, right there outside your home. So you don't have to book an appointment to go get your dog nails cut or a groomer or things like that. They're at your front door. So if your dog doesn't like that type of service, you basically trick them, and they're like, "Where are we going? We're going for a walk." And all of a sudden there's the van, and all of a sudden the dog, puts on the parking brake, and you're trying to drag this boulder, and it doesn't want to move. Not that I would know anything about that. As my dog's in the other room. It's like when 20 pounds becomes 200 pounds is if I'm taking him to the groomer. He puts that parking brake on hard. But thankfully, I just pick him up and I'm like, all right, well, we'll go this way then. Your appointment's on the 27th, Henry. You enjoy. Yeah, good thing. Good thing he doesn't know calendars. But again, that's just one service out of countless different things. And I love how you mentioned, a lot of the services are recession proof. It doesn't matter what's going on in the economy. People still need to have certain things done, whether it's insulation or, they need to have their flooring repaired or plumbing or legal or you name it, that all the apps that are out there now, it's like, well, that could be a franchise model as far as coaching, or, even, professional development coaching can be a franchise. We see it, there's all kinds of different coaches out there that have basically a franchise system, where you get access to all of their resources that they've created over the years, and you can, coach on those things. And it shortens the time, from my perspective, of building something out because you've got a reservoir of stuff that has been tested and proved. And like you mentioned before too, which is I think really important for a lot of entrepreneurs. The phrase solo entrepreneur comes in and it has a couple meanings. Well, it's you yourself doing it, but sometimes you feel like you're on an island and you don't have any peers that are also launching a business, which you do, but you don't really have that network. But in a franchisee type of situation, there's a network of people that did the same thing or doing the same thing as you. And to have those mentors available is huge.
Yeah, no, definitely. It allows you, just to be cliche here, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And you really are starting on third base because you're not having to reinvent the wheel. And so, that gives a lot of people comfort. And I have a lot of clients that will do what I call franchise stacking. That may be where they come back 6 to 12 months after launching their first one and buying another one. Oftentimes they'll buy multiples within that same brand, but oftentimes they're also buying additional brands that may either complement or diversify from that core business. So there's a lot of strategy that can go around this. We touched on this just slightly earlier, but I'd say about half of our clients are owner operators. They're looking to make the jump and run the business themselves, oftentimes with the eye on eventually replacing themselves and putting a manager in place and moving on to the next thing. Then about half of our clients are looking to come in as what we call semi-passive or investor model, where they would manage the manager, but put a manager in place day one. And, again, I don't want to sugarcoat it. There's still work that goes involved. It's not easy to stand up a business. But when you've got that support structure on the sidelines and you've got a franchisor that can carry a lot of that support water day in, day out in supporting your manager, it takes a lot of the burden off of you as the owner and it makes it doable.
From the revenue standpoint, you're reinvested in the business to grow and eventually get the ROI on it where you can look and go, well, I did this before, let's do it again. And then all of a sudden you have somebody that owns a bunch of locations, or as you said, diversify. Maybe they're in the home improvement space, but they've got the plumbing and heating, and they also have the infrastructure, or maybe even a construction build or whatever. They may have, a handful of different businesses that they're owners in, or maybe even co-owners. You can partner up with people too on this. And what that does is it just gives you a diversification. And as different tides of things happens, because sometimes the home renovation, although it really hasn't had much of a drop off in recent years, it just seems like, okay, the homes are selling like crazy, okay, the market's doing great, okay, there's a lot of home renovations going on, oh, the market's going down on the sales. Well, people are renovating because they're not going to move, but they want to improve where they're living. So it's I'm not trying to say that that's one industry that continues to do well, but it continues to do well. And there's people, there's side businesses from that benefit from that. If you're not one that's crafty and want to, put in your own flooring yourself, there's ways to, look at organizations that are out there. And again, you look at areas that are booming and growing and, all of that. If you're looking for opportunities to launch a business that would benefit from that area, that's a great way to go about it too.
Yeah. And our biggest challenge right now is that good opportunities move incredibly fast in good markets. And so we're constantly working our relationships with the franchisors. I mean, I personally do more placements than anybody else in the country. And so it allows me firsthand visibility into not only what's resonating, but also in working my relationships with the franchisors to try to get my candidates bumped up in the pipeline to get first dibs on that territory. So that's kind of the dynamic that we're seeing at play right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. In the South and the Southwest has been booming. I know Atlanta has been crazy. Even where they built the new ballpark for the Braves, and it was like, wait a minute, Turner Field's not that old. Why are they doing that? It was because I think it was Georgia Tech that wanted the stadium, so they were like, all right, we'll give us enough money, we'll go build a new one. And yeah, I was at that park, Trist, a couple of years ago, and it just the build around that area, because I used to have an aunt and uncle that lived in Georgia, so I was kind of familiar with that area and went into it, and I'm like, I don't recognize any of this. This is all brand new, and that's opportunity. So if you see an area that is growing or is having a revitalization, like downtown Detroit, for example, I'm originally from Michigan, the revitalization of downtown Detroit area is astonishing. I just never thought I would see it in my life, and I'm thrilled that it's happening. Again, opportunities there, and people are moving back downtown. That means they're going to need food, and they're going to need clothing stores. They're going to need things repaired. So just pay attention. I think that's the ultimate goal. And I definitely want to talk about the book in a moment, but pay attention where things are going. And there's many ways to do that. But if you see something in your area, it's like, oh, wow, there seems to be a resurgence there. Okay, what services do you think they'll need that aren't there now? There's an opportunity.
We got the aging population. They call it the silver tsunami. We've been talking about 10,000 people turning 65 every day for, I don't know, probably the past decade. And so now they're in their mid 70s, right? And that in-home healthcare, I mean, we had 13 clients buy into that last year, into that space. But then we have people keep having babies. And so youth soccer has been one that a lot of our clients have done very well with. And so, yeah, it's all these niches, again, that are not top of mind until you see the opportunities in front of you. And then you say, wait a minute, I never thought about this. And we get that feedback from our clients all the time. Probably 90% of them end up purchasing something that was never on their radar, that they'd never considered that industry. And so that's a lot of fun for us, is, to see those light bulb moments take place in real time.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, tell us about the book. And, I always ask authors, why in the world would you give up so much of your existence to write a book? Because it's not something you can do on a weekend. I mean, a PDF book, sure, I've done that, but an actual book, it takes time. So tell us a little bit about the book.
A lot of early mornings before the kids would wake up, right? So, really proud of it. It came out about a year and a half ago, non-food franchising. Like I said, happy to share a free digital copy with all of your listeners if they come out to our website, franbridgeconsulting.com. But it's a fairly easy read. I mean, I've packed a lot of great content into about 95 pages. So it's awesome. It's done everything I hoped it would do. All of the profits go to a great nonprofit, Hope International, that we support. So it wasn't intended to be a moneymaker, but it was really for educating and, again, waking people up to these opportunities that oftentimes are not on their radar. And so it's been such a blessing. So many of our listeners have, or our clients have listened to it or read it prior to even getting on the phone with me. So it just it allows us to start on third base in our process, if you will.
Yeah, and as a baseball fan, you start on third base, you're going to be playing in October. And that's a beautiful thing, as spring training is wrapping up at the time of this recording. And I'm like itching. It's like, okay, it's almost ready. Let's go another season. And who knows? But, I know the Braves are going to be around for it, and we'll see about other teams as well. But it's always one of my favorite times of year, because especially growing up in the Midwest, it's like, okay, winter's finally going to be ending at some point.
Yeah.
But it's all good.
And we've got the Masters coming up in just a couple of weeks here, which
there you go.
For us in Georgia, we love that. So.
Oh yeah, no, that's an amazing tournament. It's special. It's well, I mean, there's great tournaments, but there's certain events that are just special. The Masters, Daytona 500, World Series, obviously Super Bowl is another entity in itself, but there's just certain events that happen throughout the year that are just catch your attention, whether it's the Olympics or anything else. But love this conversation, John. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Yeah, come out to our website, franbridgeconsulting.com, FRAN bridgeconsulting.com. We've got a lot of content out there. Like I said, it's entirely free to work with us. I'm essentially a real estate agent, but for franchises. So we get a referral fee from the franchisor. None of that gets passed on to our clients anyway. So it's a great, clean model. But yeah, would love to engage if you're interested in taking next steps. But if nothing else, I'd say sign up. Just share your email address and we'll get the book over to you. And then we'll go from there.
Awesome. I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So John, thank you again for your work and all this amazing stuff that you're doing. I appreciate your time today.
Enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Michael.
Welcome back. I've got Louisa Milano online. Louisa, how are you?
Fan-freaking-tastic.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I always love your energy is already good. I'm like, okay, good. I mean, I've already had my coffee for the day, so we're good. But it's like, I don't need a top up. We're good. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this very important conversation.
Yeah, a little bit about me. I live and breathe entrepreneurship, and specifically an empowering, joyful entrepreneurial journey. I think a lot of people that view either early in their entrepreneurial journey or looking to launch their entrepreneurial journey have either two, they're in one of two camps. Oh my gosh, this is amazing, and screw my 9 to 5, and I'm gonna go, and it's purpose and freedom and all this, and it's true. And there's a lot of work behind it. And then you have others that are like, oh my God, I don't think I want to do it because it's just, I've heard this and I've heard that, and I know this founder or that entrepreneur, and they're just like always working 9 to 5. And so between those two extremes, I try to find this middle ground where, yeah, there's work. Being an entrepreneur is a lot of work. And along the journey, unpopular opinion, you get metaphorically gut punched on a regular basis, but you learn to love the process. You learn to fall in love with finding your audience, creating your offers, going to market, learning, getting your knocks and getting back up again, going, dang, I learned a ton. Let me go. Let me go back at it. And that's what I live and breathe, the journey of bringing a little more joy into that entrepreneurial landscape from early stage, what do you do, all the way to scaling and really growing and building that revenue engine in a way that looks good and feels good. I'm a cake and eat it too kind of girl.
There you go. I'm in the same boat. It's like there's more than enough for all of us. We just have to find our way through the bumps and bruises and lessons, and we will reach, whatever journey or destination we want to go to. And it reminds me of, one of the things I love doing is journaling. So I've got notebooks. Actually, I can see them on the other side of this camera. There's some notebooks from the last few years, and some of them are when I launched my organization back in 2016. And I look back at the notes, and it's funny. I look and go, wow, I really didn't know what the heck I was doing, but this is cute. It's like I see the growth, and I'm like, okay, wow, that's good. It's like, oh, I guess I'm not going to do that because that's been on a to-do list item since 2017. I don't think I need to do that now because it doesn't match up with what I'm doing. But it's one of those things where, and I tell an entrepreneur this all the time, you have to make sure that as best as you can. And yes, like you said, there's a lot of time and effort and hours that are put in this. You make sure that you're kind of looking around while you're doing it. You enjoy the journey, the bumps and the bruises, the gut punches, like you said, and even those small victories, landing that first client or selling that first offer, or like we talked about in the pre-show, and launching that funnel to let people kind of guide themselves into the direction where they want to go and what they need so they get the product or service that is right for them. And it's such a beautiful thing when we get to do that. And I am just thrilled when I hear people say, I think I'm going to launch my own business. My first question, or actually first comment out of it, is like, good, do it. I don't know what they're going to launch. I have no idea what they're going to launch. I said, good, do it. And they look at me, I haven't told you what they can do. I say, you want to launch a business? Go do it. Because that's where it starts. All the products and services that we use on a daily basis originally came from an idea, a concept, or somebody wanting to do something. And we have to encourage that. And one of the things that you do really, really well, amongst many things, is you're a strong advocate for community. And I think, and we talked a little bit about this in the pre-show too, over the last 5 years, the need for community, I don't think, has ever been stronger. And so many people, unfortunately, for one reason or another, kind of silo themselves or get siloed away from peers and mentors that can really help them grow, not only as an entrepreneur, but as a person. So why don't you share a little bit about the work you do as far as a community? I love the name of your community, by the way. It definitely has a great ring to it. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
It does, yeah. So Herlocity is about to turn a year old, something I'm really excited about. And it's a product of my own entrepreneurial journey and really wanting to bring something to bear that I wished had been there when I started my entrepreneurial journey. There are so many feelings of isolation. We go sometimes from a big corporate job, 9 to 5 with team and direct reports. And even in a smaller organization, you're certainly before COVID, on a regular basis, you were around a lot of other people. And then you're on your own. You're working from home, or maybe you're at a co-working spot, and the dynamic changes, and no one really prepares you for how that energetically can feel like the rug is getting pulled out from under you. And I gripped my wheel at 10 and 2, and I was like, I got this. I got this. If it's going to be, it's up to me. If it's going to be, it's up to me. If it's going to be, it's up to me. And I said, wow, in year 2, I started to look up and around. You talked about looking around and enjoying the journey. And I went, wait, just because I can do this alone doesn't mean I have to. So, like, whatever you're doing right now, take that one thing to mind, to heart. Just because you can do it alone doesn't mean you have to. There's an African proverb that I love that says, you go fast alone, you go far together. And going fast alone is fun until it's not. And you look around and you're like, oh, all I hear are the crickets. And so, and there's an art to connection. We actually in Herlosity this morning had a masterclass on building relationships and really cultivating strategic relationships, and what the mistakes are that are commonly made, and the mindset it takes to succeed, and what are those action steps. And I go, man, I was sitting there listening to the master class speaker and watching the women in the boxes from all over the world going, wow, I've created something that gives women across the globe a sense of belonging on their entrepreneurial journey. And it is so, as a founder, fulfilling to have that for myself. And then when you see those wins and you see those shares and you see people share in the breakout rooms, in the community, in events, wow, I didn't know that you felt that way too. Or it's not just me, or, oh my gosh, what you just shared inspired me. And there's almost this synergy that happens where we learn with and from each other, and then we apply that into our business. And in my one-on-one work with clients and in the community, I see that there's so much more creativity, there's more innovation, there's more growth with less effort, because you're building a network where you're 1 or 2 texts away from an introduction, a connection, and it takes time to cultivate that. But if you plant the seeds, you're not guaranteed to have a fruit tree, but you'll never have a fruit tree if you don't plant the seeds. And it starts with community and connection.
And one of the things that jumps out at me too about this, and I've experienced this as an entrepreneur, is there are times when you feel a little beat down, and you just, that race is, and even if you've got a team and you've got peers, there are times where you're dragging a little bit, and it could be the weather, it could be news alerts. I always tell people, don't pay attention to the news, please. It's just going to bring you down. But just don't do it. It doesn't matter what flavor you consume. It's just focus on your path. You make your own economy, okay? And you don't have to worry about anything else if you do that. But what I find is when you're part of a community and you get to be with other people, and even this show and talking with people, when I finish a conversation, I say 99.9% of the time, the call will end, and I am on such a euphoric high and want to take on the planet, we're going to make this world better. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. It's that community thing. It help reinvigorate you, go and say, you know what? Okay, it's okay for you to feel down for a moment, but don't stay there. Remember why you're doing this. Remember, how bad did you want this? And you just do it. Is it going to be easy? No. If anybody told you it was going to be easy, I'm sorry, it isn't. There's challenging times, but you persevere, because you have to remind yourself, okay, why did I want to do this in the first place? Why did I want to leave my corporate gig that was quote unquote safe to venture out into this, or stop being a nurse, for example, and launch my own business because I just can't handle the workload anymore in the healthcare sector, or wherever it happens to be? You made a choice. and hopefully you talk with some people about it, and to get their feedback, because it's important to seek guidance. And that's again where community is such a key component, because you could be stuck on something and someone says, well, we'll do this and this. Next thing you know, you go, oh, you flip a couple levers and all of a sudden it starts working. You're like, oh, okay. And then you get to move on to the next stage and the next stage. And that's where community is such a beautiful thing, and what you've designed. And congratulations on the birthday. I'm assuming you're going to have cake. It probably won't be as messy as a 1-year-old's birthday cake party, but it could be. I don't know. I don't know how you party. I'm assuming it might be messy, but that's all right. They sell wipes and cleaning sprays and things like that to clean it up. That's my recommendation.
Totally.
Have a cake and go 1-year-old on it. Everybody will look at you, and they most of the people that know you probably go, I'm not surprised she's doing it this way, but yeah, so give it a shot. But yeah, I think again, community is so important, and it can be a huge community or a small one, whatever works for you. But I think again, going back to Herlocity, and I think about this and go back to the pandemic for a moment. When I started seeing a lot of female executives, high-ranking executives, take a step back and go, you know what? I'm not going to work this grind anymore because I want to spend more time with my family and my kids. It upset me, and I'm going to tell you why. Because it shouldn't be a choice of either or. And I think that's my biggest complaint and the workplace culture and the workspace stuff that I do, is I don't want people to have to choose between their family and their work. You shouldn't have to make that choice. It should be you have them both and they harmonize how they need to be. As an entrepreneur, one of the big things that gives you some flexibility, for more or less, is you have the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to spend more time working at home so I can spend more time with my children or with my family or my dog or my cat, whatever you want, but to give you that control back of how you spend your time so you can be really creative and rested and grow and all of that. So again, I commend you on the community. Love to hear your thoughts on some of that.
Yeah, what comes up for me is when I am talking to folks about Herlocity and community, some of the challenges or the resistance or the concerns they have in a very human way is, but what if I say I don't know? If I say I don't know, or if I show up like we have this idea that we need to have it as entrepreneurs all figured out, that we need to know the answers, and to not know is somehow a bad mark on our character. And so I think that keeps folks from stepping into community. And tragically, what it does is it furthers the isolation, and it furthers the depressive tendencies, or I'm not cut out for this, which is one of the most heartbreaking things I hear entrepreneurs is like, I don't know, Louisa, I might have to go back. I mean, it's not beyond me to go back to corporate if I can't make this work. And that breaks my heart, because it breaks my heart and it lights me up. It breaks my heart because that's an experience that they're having. And it lights me up because I go, I'd be willing to bet you're not a part of a community of like-minded individuals. Because when you are a part of a community of like-minded individuals who are on a similar journey to you, Herlocity is all about female entrepreneurship and navigating the journey across the pillars that we have of programming, which are very comprehensive and holistic for women. So it's a very generalized community with a lot of programming in specific areas, but you also have very, very niche communities for product-based B2B organizations. And School does a really good job in the directory of like listing all the different communities that there are out there. But I'd be willing to bet you're not a part of a community of like-minded people, because when you are, you're not alone. You can ask questions, you can ask for support. And even if you're not at first the one putting yourself out there, you're hearing what other people saying and you're still getting value. We have hundreds of members in the community, and some people don't really participate. But then I get a message from them that they got so much value from a resource or a post or a master class. I'm like, I haven't seen this person engage like maybe ever. And it's similar on social media because social media is kind of like this ginormous community, but we get into other spaces and you get to know the people versus somebody in your feed among the, like, I don't know about you, but like 7,000 followers on LinkedIn. I sometimes see the same people, and if the algorithm is in a good mood, I see them again, but it takes a lot more effort to keep people in LinkedIn, for example, in your plane of awareness. But in a community, you can really build these relationships. You can really connect with people, and then they become referral partners. They give you business. You can add value. So there's the giving and the receiving of it in community. You offer, you give, you share brilliance, and then you receive. And that reciprocity, that dynamic, to me makes this is going to sound like a cheesy bumper sticker, but it doesn't mean I'm wrong, guys. It's the difference that makes the difference.
Yeah, and I think that's, and I, thinking back to community, I think back to even my childhood or my parents' childhoods when, they'd get home from school and they'd go over to their friend's house and then they would, eat dinner there. So they, the phone call would go back to home and, my grandma or grandfather would answer the phone and they'd say, Diane's eating here. Okay. And but it was community. It was just everybody kind of took care of each other and helped each other out wherever they were in life or in business. And everyone was at, different stages, give or take. And people that, are maybe a little further along, the majority of people I've ever encountered like that are a little ahead of me in my business and all of that, if I was quote unquote brave enough to ask them for help, I mean, they were like almost on their knees crying, thanking me to ask them for help because they were so full of information that they wanted to share. And that's, you tap into that, people, because it's a game changer. It'll get you there a lot faster than if you're doing it solo. I mean, yeah, there's no shortage of ways to find out how to do things. I mean, it's all there. You can ask ChatGPT; it'll tell you all you need to know about whatever you want to learn.
Totally.
But it doesn't have that human approach where you're having a conversation and you can see or even hear, even if it's over a phone call, the tone of voice. And I thought about that, and that makes sense. And well, what about this? And it spurs on thoughts and ideas that you may or may not have thought about. And you're like, okay, maybe I could do that, or make this tweak, and you'll actually see this, do this, or I've been struggling with the same thing. You know what? Maybe we can ask our network and see if there's anybody there that would know somebody. Well, someone will know someone. And again, that's when you start seeing it's almost like a wishing pool where it's like, I wish I could find out how to do this. And all of a sudden, boom, there you go. Here it is. And it's usually, especially in a community setting, it's specific to you because they have an understanding about what your business is, what you're doing. Yeah, I can give you in AI or Google or whatever can give you a generic response on what to do with something. But in a community, they know who you are. So the response is going to be custom made to you in all likelihood. And from there, the likelihood of you being able to implement it and being successful increases dramatically because most people anyway, I hope, aren't going to give you bad advice. They're going to give you advice because they want you to succeed. Why? Because it strengthens the community.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I want to add that dovetails to what you shared is, and it touched on the note of advice, is I'm a big champion of sovereignty and personal authority and us being the expert on us. And it's exciting to be on that journey and to drum that beat, to march to the beat of that drum in 2025, where to your point, you have ChatGPT, you have speakers, you have podcasts, you have books. I mean, there's so much information. And even here, all that Michael and I are doing here today is giving you information. I'm not here to say that community is the only way to do it. And if anybody in any sector says this is the right way to entrepreneur, run as fast as you can away from them, because it isn't linear. Growth isn't linear. An entrepreneurial journey isn't linear. But when people share information, Michael, myself, a community, a space, you join Herlocity and you connect with somebody, you've got an access to hundreds of women across the globe when you join Herlocity, and you get on the phone and you start chatting about your journey and you ask for something and you make that brave step and go, who do you know? Or I'm looking for this, or I want this kind of support. And then they give you information. Guess what? You now have options. You could still choose to do it the way you want to do it, but it gives you diversity of thought. And it can be so easy to live in our own silo and in our own thought bubble. The other thing that I love about community is it pulls you out of that. There's other perspectives, other cultures, at least in global communities, there's other perspectives. There's diversity of thinking, there's diversity of leadership, there's diversity of entrepreneurship, and you get these diverse dynamics and go, oh, I never thought of it like that. I don't know that I'm going to do exactly what Michael said, but I was going to do this over here. And now there's this new, and this speaks to the innovation I was mentioning earlier. Now there's this new way that I could go to market with this product that I hadn't thought of. And it's not quite you, it's not quite them. It's a blend of the two. And that's really fun when you have those moments of, oh crap, this is actually really cool. I hadn't ever thought of it like this.
And I think that's what's so eye-opening is it gets us out of our silos and different perspectives that we can consider. We may not implement them, but at least we look at it and go, okay, so that's what it looks like outside of my fishbowl. All right. And again, it can help you go, you know what, maybe this product launch isn't the right thing to do right now because of what Sheila said or what Amy said. And I think that's something, again, you're not going to have unless you're part of a community. So, Louise, I love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you, Herlocity, and everything else you're doing?
Yeah, Herlocity, www.herlocity.com, a play on words between her and velocity. I'm on Instagram, luisamilano.herlocity, LinkedIn, Luisa Milano, and then my website, www.luisamilano.com, LuisaMolano. Reach out. I'm a real human. I think when we do podcasts, we go, oh yeah, but I'm not going to reach out. That's what they say. I respond to every single DM that I get. Between you and I, it may take a beat. Sometimes it's a few days, but I always, always respond. To me, somebody reaching out is so appreciated by me, because it's taking that step of, okay, maybe I don't have to do this alone. So maybe this is your brave step that you take, is go, all right, she said I could reach out. I'm going to find her on LinkedIn or on Instagram, and I'm just going to send a message, say, hey, hi, heard you on the Michael Levitt podcast. Just wanted to say hello. That's it.
Awesome. Definitely have that in the show notes. So, Louisa, thank you for being you. The world needs more people like you that are crushing it and doing great things to help all of us. So thanks again for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.